Tonight, leave the modern world behind. As the day grows quiet, we'll journey into the forgotten corners of American history, where silent frontiers, lonely deserts, and distant mountains still whisper stories long buried by time. Have you ever wondered what the world sounded like before cities, before clocks, before even the smallest flame glowed behind a window? It is a surprisingly difficult question to answer. Most people imagine early humans spending every waking moment chasing food beneath the sun, only to collapse into sleep as darkness arrived. Yet the night was never simply an ending. It was another world entirely filled with quiet routines, hidden dangers, familiar comforts, and moments of reflection that shaped humanity just as deeply as daylight ever did. Tonight you are invited to leave behind modern certainty and step into an evening from tens of thousands of years ago. There are no streetlights waiting ahead, no glowing screens, and no comforting hum of distant traffic. Instead, fading daylight slowly softens the outlines of hills and forests. The last birds settle into their branches. Cool air drifts across open grasslands, carrying scents of damp earth, wood smoke, and growing darkness. Somewhere beyond the edge of sight, unseen creatures begin waking as others prepare to rest. This is not a story of kings or famous battles. It is the quieter history of ordinary people whose names disappeared long before writing was invented. They lived remarkable lives without realizing history would one day search for their footprints. Every evening demanded decisions that could mean comfort, hunger, safety, or survival. Every shadow carried possibilities. Every spark of fire mattered. So before you settle into the story, take a second to like the video and hit subscribe. Tell me where you're listening from and what time it is where you are. I always enjoy seeing how far these bedtime journeys travel around the world. Now dim the lights and allow yourself to follow the fading sunlight as if your own footsteps are crossing a landscape untouched by roads or fences. The day has been long. Your legs are tired from walking over uneven ground, weaving through patches of grass that brush softly against your knees, crossing shallow streams that leave cool water clinging to your ankles, and climbing rocky slopes where every loose stone demanded careful balance. The work of daylight is almost finished, but the work of night has only just begun. You arrive with the others near a place that has become familiar through many seasons. Perhaps it is the entrance to a limestone cave overlooking a valley. Perhaps it is only a sheltered bend beneath a line of ancient trees where the wind loses much of its strength. Either way, the place has been chosen carefully. Nothing here happens by accident. Long before sunset, experienced eyes had already considered every detail. Is there fresh water nearby? Are game trails dangerously close? Can smoke escape without revealing the camp too easily? Does the morning sun reach this place quickly enough to warm cold hands after dawn? Such questions become habits rather than conversations. They are carried inside memory passed from older generations to younger ones, without anyone needing to announce their importance. The air grows cooler. You notice it first on the backs of your hands, then across your face. Heat collected through the afternoon begins slipping away into the open sky. Tiny insects dance briefly above patches of grass before disappearing into the gathering dusk. A gentle breeze carries the rich smell of crushed plants beneath countless footsteps. Someone kneels beside yesterday's ashes. There is no dramatic celebration, no triumphant cry, only quiet concentration. The fire has not truly died. Beneath the pale blanket of ash, faint warmth still survives. With practiced fingers, dry twigs are arranged carefully above hidden embers. Someone bends close and blows slow, patient breaths. Thin threads of smoke rise into the cooling air. For a moment, nothing changes. Then comes a tiny orange glow. Another breath. Another spark. Soon the first delicate flames begin licking upward through the bundle of dry grass. That small light transforms everything. Modern life often treats fire as something ordinary arriving instantly with the push of a button. For you here, however, every successful flame feels almost miraculous. Archaeological evidence suggests that many prehistoric communities became highly skilled at preserving fire, rather than creating it from scratch each day. Carrying embers between camps may have been easier than striking new flames repeatedly with ancient materials. Exactly how often early humans could reliably start fresh fires remains uncertain. Some researchers believe advanced fire-making techniques developed gradually over thousands of years, while others argue dependable methods appeared surprisingly late in human history. The evidence remains incomplete, leaving room for careful imagination beside the known facts. Whatever the answer, tonight's fire is precious. Its warmth spreads slowly across waiting faces. Orange light pushes back the darkness only a few meters, leaving the surrounding landscape hidden behind gentle shadows. Beyond that glowing circle, the world belongs to unseen animals and whispering night winds. You sit close enough to feel gentle heat against your skin, but far enough away to avoid the drifting smoke. It curls upward with an earthy scent that mixes with drying grass, damp soil, and the faint aroma of roasted roots prepared earlier in the afternoon. The sounds begin changing. During daylight, birds dominated the landscape. Now insects take their turn. A steady chorus rises from every direction. Crickets rub their wings together in patient rhythm. Somewhere far away an owl calls once before silence returns. Leaves rustle softly as unseen creatures move through undergrowth, each sound encouraging careful listening rather than fear. Silence itself becomes information. The sudden absence of insect songs might signal a passing predator. A startled flock of birds could reveal movement beyond the camp. Even the direction of the wind matters, carrying unfamiliar scents toward alert noses. Your senses remain awake. Modern people often rely most heavily on vision, yet darkness teaches different priorities. Hearing grows sharper. Smell becomes more important. The rough texture of stone beneath your hand, the comforting warmth radiating from nearby companions, and the changing direction of cool air all become quiet guides through the evening. Historians and anthropologists broadly agree that life after sunset was not simply empty waiting before sleep. Night offered opportunities impossible during the busy demands of daylight. Once hunting, gathering, and travel ended, attention could shift toward people rather than landscapes. Conversation likely became slower. Children settled closer to parents and grandparents. Older members of the group finally had uninterrupted time to observe younger faces. Perhaps someone laughed softly after a clumsy mistake made earlier that afternoon. Gentle humour almost certainly existed long before written language. Every human society known today shares laughter in one form or another. It would be surprising if your distant ancestors had somehow forgotten to smile. One delightful idea occasionally suggested by anthropologists imagines that evening may have been the birthplace of storytelling itself. Without daylight tasks demanding constant movement, minds became free to wander. A successful hunt grew slightly larger with every retelling. Dangerous animals became wiser. Brave companions became even braver. Whether every detail remained perfectly accurate hardly mattered. The stories carried lessons wrapped inside entertainment. No one could know the exact words, but perhaps that uncertainty is part of their beauty. The stars appear one by one above the darkening sky, far brighter than most modern people ever experience. There is no electric glow to compete with them. The Milky Way stretches overhead like a pale river crossing endless darkness. You do not yet know the names future civilizations will give these constellations, but they already belong to your world. You simply look upward and wonder. The night has only begun. Section 2. The last streaks of orange disappear beyond the distant horizon, and the familiar landscape quietly transforms into something entirely different. During daylight, you could recognize every path, every fallen branch, every cluster of stones scattered across the valley. Now the world becomes simpler and stranger at the same time. Shapes soften into silhouettes. Distances become uncertain. Even the nearest trees seem taller than they did only an hour ago. You have learned not to fight the darkness. Instead, you work with it. Long before the first stars fully brighten above your head, everyone in the camp understands that there are still many important tasks remaining. Contrary to the popular image of prehistoric people collapsing into sleep as soon as the sun disappears, evening is often one of the busiest and most social parts of the day. The frantic pace of gathering food has ended, but quieter work now begins. There is no whistle announcing the transition. No bell rings. The rhythm simply changes. Some adults quietly return from nearby streams carrying the final containers of water before complete darkness makes the trip more dangerous. Others gather armfuls of dry branches that were deliberately left untouched during the afternoon, knowing they would be needed once the temperature began to fall. A few younger members of the group walk only short distances beyond the glow of the fire, collecting handfuls of grass leaves or small pieces of bark that catch flame easily. Every movement is calm. Nothing feels hurried. Experience has taught everyone that rushing and fading light usually creates more problems than it solves. You notice how carefully each person walks. Feet remember familiar ground even when eyes struggle to see it clearly. This is a place occupied before, perhaps many times across changing seasons. Certain stones are avoided without conscious thought. Low branches are ducked beneath almost automatically. Tiny landmarks invisible to strangers live inside memory. That memory is precious. Modern maps do not exist here. Neither do written directions. Knowledge survives because people carry it together. The air grows noticeably cooler as warmth escapes into the open sky. Scientists today call this radiative cooling a simple process that prehistoric people understood without needing a name for it. They knew which valleys trapped cold air overnight. They recognized hillsides where evening remained slightly warmer. Those observations, repeated over countless generations, quietly shaped where camps were built. You rub your hands together. The skin feels slightly dry after a long day outdoors. Nearby, someone spreads fresh grass across the ground inside a shelter. It looks almost effortless, but the task serves several purposes at once. Softer bedding makes sleep more comfortable. Dry vegetation helps separate resting bodies from cold earth. Fresh plant material may also discourage certain insects, although historians continue debating exactly how effective different prehistoric bedding methods truly were. Archaeological discoveries inside ancient caves have revealed layers of grasses, reeds, and even aromatic plants beneath sleeping areas. Some researchers suggest that strongly scented leaves may have helped repel insects or parasites. Others believe their presence simply reflects what happened to be available nearby. The evidence leaves room for several thoughtful interpretations. Either way, the camp smells pleasantly earthy. Fresh grass mixes with smoke drifting lazily through still evening air. Damp soil releases a cool mineral scent after losing the day's heat. Somewhere close crushed herbs add faint sweetness almost too subtle to notice unless the wind shifts toward you. Smell matters here, much more than you might expect. A strange scent carried by the breeze can reveal approaching rain before clouds become visible. It might also signal large animals moving through nearby vegetation. Experienced hunters often recognize familiar creatures long before they hear or see them. You begin noticing something else. People rarely wander alone. Even simple evening chores usually happen in pairs or small groups, not because everyone is afraid, but because companionship offers practical advantages. Two people carry heavy branches more easily. One person notices details another might overlook. Conversation also makes repetitive work feel lighter. Perhaps that habit shapes something deeper within humanity. Psychologists often suggest that cooperation became one of our greatest evolutionary strengths. Looking around the camp, it is easy to imagine why. Very few essential tasks belong to only one person. Survival depends upon many quiet contributions that receive little attention individually, but become remarkable together. One individual sorts gathered wood into neat piles. Another checks bundles of dried plant fibers collected earlier. Someone else carefully inspects stone tools that will need repair before sunrise. Children carry surprisingly small loads, yet everyone seems pleased that they are helping rather than merely watching. The work itself teaches. No classroom is needed. A child learns which branches burn slowly simply by handing different pieces to an older relative. Another discovers how to stack wood so morning dew will not soak every log before dawn. These lessons unfold naturally through participation rather than formal instruction. Historians generally agree that learning in prehistoric societies happened largely through observation and imitation. Young people watched adults constantly absorbing complicated skills over many years. Exactly how much direct teaching occurred remains uncertain. Some anthropologists argue instruction became increasingly deliberate as technology grew more sophisticated. Others believe demonstration alone accomplished far more than modern people often assume. The truth probably lies somewhere between. Darkness continues spreading. Now the fire seems brighter without actually changing. Beyond its orange circle, moonlight slowly reveals gentle outlines of distant hills. If the moon is full, travel remains possible for short distances. If clouds hide both moon and stars, however, even familiar paths become surprisingly difficult. Tonight the sky is generous. Thousands upon thousands of stars appear overhead. You cannot help looking upward every few moments. It is tempting to imagine prehistoric people spending endless evenings studying constellations, yet scholars remain cautious. We know ancient humans certainly observed the heavens. Seasonal stars would have been impossible to ignore. Whether complex star stories already existed tens of thousands of years ago remains an open question. Still, curiosity requires no written language. A child pointing toward a bright star needs no translation. Nearby, soft laughter briefly rises from one corner of the camp. Perhaps someone attempted to carry an awkward bundle of branches only to trip harmlessly over a hidden root. The moment passes quickly. Gentle humour seems entirely at home here. Even during challenging lives, people almost certainly found reasons to smile. Laughter releases tension, strengthens friendships, and reminds everyone that not every moment revolves around survival. The fire crackles softly. Tiny sparks drift upward before disappearing into darkness. One particularly large piece of wood settles with a quiet pop, sending glowing embers rolling together beneath the growing flames. No one panics. Someone calmly adjusts the logs using a long stick. It's a movement performed hundreds of times before, maybe maybe thousands. As you watch these familiar routines unfold, another thought quietly emerges. The evening does not belong to one individual, it belongs to the group. Everyone contributes something, whether strength, experience, patience, observation, or simple willingness to help. That shared rhythm creates comfort difficult to measure. Modern homes often separate family members into different rooms after sunset. Here nearly everything happens within sight of everyone else. Privacy exists only in small moments. Community surrounds every ordinary task. The wind shifts gently. Smoke moves away from the camp instead of through it. Several people notice immediately. No words are exchanged. Tiny adjustments follow naturally as individuals shift where they sit or continue working. Such silent coordination fascinates many anthropologists today. Humans possess remarkable abilities to read subtle body language and shared routines. Long before written rules existed, cooperation often depended upon noticing almost invisible signals from companions. Perhaps this quiet understanding became one of humanity's oldest languages. Not spoken, simply lived. The final bundles of wood are stacked neatly beneath an overhanging rock where nighttime moisture cannot easily reach them. Water containers rest within easy reach. Bedding has been refreshed. Tomorrow's tools wait patiently beside the fire. The camp is ready. Outside the circle of light, the great prehistoric night stretches endlessly across forests, rivers, grasslands, and mountains. Inside that circle, however, there is warmth. There is purpose. And there is home. Section 3. The camp has settled into a quieter rhythm now, yet no one assumes the evening can take care of itself. The flames sway gently with each passing breeze, rising and falling like slow breaths. Their warmth reaches your face while your back still feels the cool touch of the growing night. It is a small reminder that comfort depends upon something remarkably fragile. A single fire, nothing more. You watch glowing embers as shift beneath blackening logs. Their soft orange light seems almost alive, changing shape with every passing minute. It is beautiful to look at, but everyone nearby understands something even more important. This fire is not simply a source of warmth, it is the center of the camp's survival. Without it, the night becomes far longer. Long before written history, fire transformed what humans could become. It extended the day beyond sunset softened. Hard foods through cooking, frightened many prayers, dried damp clothing, hardened wooden spear tips and gathered people into one shared space. Around its light, conversations unfolded, memories were exchanged, and perhaps the earliest traditions quietly took root. Yet fire also demanded constant attention. Unlike the sun, it never returned by itself. You notice that nobody wanders too far away without first glancing toward the hearth. Someone is always close enough to notice if a burning log collapses, or if the flames begin shrinking too quickly. There is no official title for this responsibility. It simply belongs to everyone, though older and more experienced adults often carry the greatest share of it. The task is surprisingly gentle. There is no frantic feeding of enormous logs. Instead, small branches are added patiently, allowing the fire to breathe without becoming wasteful. Thick pieces of hardwood burn slowly through the night, while thinner twigs help restore fading flames when needed. Every piece of fuel has its moment. The smell of burning wood changes as different branches are added. Dry oak releases a richer, earthy aroma. Pine, if available, sends fragrant resin into the cool air with occasional bright sparks. Damp wood hisses softly before surrendering to the heat. Your clothes absorb the scent. Your hair does too. By morning, nearly everyone in the camp will carry that familiar fragrance of smoke, a scent so ordinary that few people even notice it anymore. Modern campers often complain about smelling like campfire afterward. For your ancestors, that smell may have carried unexpected advantages. Some researchers have suggested that lingering smoke on clothing or animal hides could have discouraged biting insects. Others wonder whether it partially masked human scent from curious predators. The evidence remains incomplete, and scholars continue debating how significant these effects truly were. Still, it is an intriguing possibility that the very smell modern people wash away might once have quietly served survival. You stretch your hands toward the warmth. Not too close. Experience teachers, respect. Children learn this lesson early. Fire comforts, but it also burns without mercy. There are no hospitals waiting beyond the horizon, no creams to soothe severe injuries, no easy solutions if carelessness leads to disaster. Every member of the group understands that caution is part of living well. The youngest children remain close to attentive adults, not because they cannot be trusted, because everyone remembers learning. One older woman gently reaches forward with a long branch, nudging a rolling log back toward the center of the fire. She performs the movement almost absent-mindedly, as though her hands have repeated it thousands of evenings before. Nearby, a young child watches every motion with quiet fascination. No lesson is announced. No lecture follows. The knowledge of Lord simply passes. Historians broadly agree that much prehistoric learning occurred through close observation. Skills were absorbed over years rather than taught in short moments. Firekeeping may have been one of the earliest examples of the patient education requiring judgment that only repeated experience could provide. The flames rise slightly higher, their dancing light paints moving shadows across nearby rocks. Faces appear and disappear as people shift their positions. One moment someone looks thoughtful, the next a flicker of light makes them seem to smile. The fire changes everyone, not physically, visually. Perhaps this constant movement contributed to the fascination humans have always felt toward flames. Even today, people often find themselves staring into fireplaces without knowing exactly why. The gentle unpredictability seems to calm the mind rather than demand attention. Scientists studying modern psychology sometimes describe this effect as softly captivating. Certain natural movements hold attention without overwhelming it, allowing thoughts to wander peacefully. Historians cannot know whether prehistoric people experienced fire in exactly the same way, but it is difficult to imagine anyone remaining entirely untouched by hours spent watching glowing embers beneath endless stars. A log settles. Crack! Tiny sparks rise into the darkness. They disappear almost immediately. Someone quietly adds another piece of wood. Nothing more needs saying. You begin noticing another important detail. The fire itself is arranged carefully rather than randomly. Larger logs often rest beneath or beside smaller pieces, creating spaces where air can flow naturally. Too little space and the flames struggle. Too much and precious fuel burns too quickly. Generations of quiet experimentation likely shaped these habits. Nobody needed chemistry to understand oxygen. They understood fire through observation. Archaeological sites across Africa, Europe, and Western Asia reveal ancient hearths that were repeatedly rebuilt in nearly the same locations. Some camps preserved fireplaces for many occupations across different seasons. Ash accumulated in distinct layers, telling modern archaeologists that these places remained meaningful long after individual evenings had faded into memory. Exactly how organized every prehistoric hearth became remains uncertain. Some discoveries suggest remarkably structured living spaces surrounding central fires, while others reveal simpler arrangements. The variety reminds us that there was never one universal way to live as an early human. Different landscapes encourage different solutions. Different cultures probably did too. A pleasant breeze slips through the camp. The smoke bends sideways before lifting into the night sky. Everyone instinctively shifts slightly, avoiding the thickest clouds without interrupting conversations or quiet work. It is such a small movement that you almost miss it. Shared habits like this reveal remarkable cooperation. No commands, no complaints, only adjustment. As darkness deepens, another responsibility quietly emerges. Tomorrow's fire must already be considered tonight. Gathering wood in full daylight is easier and safer than searching for it after midnight. The piles stacked nearby are not merely for the present moment. They are insurance against colder hours before dawn when temperatures often reach their lowest point. Planning ahead becomes second nature. The future always matters. Perhaps that ability to think beyond immediate needs helps distinguish humans from many other animals. Preparing fuel hours before it becomes necessary reflects patience, memory, and imagination working together. The warmth continues spreading through your body. Your feet, tired from walking all day, begin relaxing against the dry ground. Muscles loosen, breathing slows. Around you, conversation becomes quieter. The louder excitement of returning to camp has faded into peaceful murmurs. Some people speak softly while repairing belongings. Others simply watch the fire in comfortable silence. Science does not feel empty. It feels shared. Many anthropologists believe communal fires strengthen social bonds far beyond their practical uses. Once darkness limited travel and hunting, people naturally spent more uninterrupted time together. Stories, songs, planning humor, and simple companionship may all have flourished because fire extended the useful hours of evening. Without flames, nights would have been very different, much shorter, much lonelier. You glance upward once again. The stars seem brighter than before. Perhaps they always were. The fire beneath them burns steadily now, no longer struggling for life, but glowing with quiet confidence. Its warmth reaches every face gathered nearby, reminding you that survival is sometimes built from grand discoveries, and sometimes from patient attention to a handful of glowing embers. Tonight, those embers hold back an entire world of darkness. For everyone here, there is more than enough. Section 4. The fire has settled into a steady glow, no longer demanding constant attention. Thick logs burn with quiet confidence, their surfaces crumbling into glowing charcoal beneath delicate ribbons of flame. Around you, the camp breathes more slowly now. The busiest work has ended. The night belongs to gentler rhythms. It is finally time to eat. Not everyone reaches eagerly for food the moment it appears. That would feel strangely familiar to modern eyes, but prehistoric evenings often unfolded with patient order rather than hurried hunger. The day's efforts still linger in every movement. Dust clings to ankles. Hands carry faint traces of stone bark and earth. Before anyone thinks about a meal, tools are set aside, children are gathered closer, and the fire is adjusted one more time. The food itself looks remarkably simple, yet every bite tells a long story. A flat stone rests near the edge of the fire, warmed slowly throughout the evening. Beside it lie roasted roots with darkened skins, bundles of edible leaves, cracked nuts gathered earlier in the day, and pieces of meat slowly cooking above glowing embers rather than open flames. Nothing here resembles a modern feast yet. Every item represents hours of careful work. The smell is comforting. Smoke drifts through the cool air, carrying the rich scent of roasting meat mixed with the sweetness of caramelizing roots. Damp earth beneath your feet releases its own quiet fragrance after surrendering the day's warmth. Somewhere nearby, crushed herbs add a fresh note that disappears almost as quickly as it arrives. Your stomach notices first. Even before food reaches your hands, cooking changed far more than flavor. Archaeologists generally agree that controlled fire transformed human diets in profound ways. Heat softens plant fibers, breaks down connective tissue in meat, and allows the body to absorb more energy with less effort. Some scientists even argue that regular cooking helped support the evolution of larger human brains by making calories easier to obtain. Exactly when cooking became widespread remains uncertain. Evidence points toward a gradual process, rather than a single revolutionary moment. Some researchers believe controlled cooking began hundreds of thousands of years earlier than others suggest. Ancient hearths offer clues, but they rarely answer every question. Like so much of prehistory, the story survives only in fragments. Tonight, however, there is no debate, only dinner. One older hunter carefully lifts a piece of meat from the edge of the fire using a forked branch. He presses it gently with a sharpened stick, checking whether the inside has finished cooking. There are no clocks to measure time. Experience provides everything needed. Nearby, someone turns thick roots buried beneath warm ash. Their outer skins have become almost black. Inside, they are soft. Many wild roots contain bitter compounds when eaten raw. Heat often transforms them into something sweeter and easier to digest. Early humans almost certainly learned this through generations of observation, careful experimentation, and occasionally unfortunate mistakes. Knowledge arrives slowly, sometimes painfully. One fascinating possibility suggested by some anthropologists is that prehistoric people may have remembered edible plants through stories rather than lists. Instead of saying, "this root is safe," they may have connected certain foods with places, seasons, or memorable events. Historians continue exploring how knowledge was organized before writing existed, and no single answer satisfies every discovery. You accept a warm root passed from someone sitting beside you. Its rough skin flakes gently beneath your fingers. Steam rises as you split it open. The inside is pale and surprisingly soft, releasing an earthy sweetness that fills your mouth with gentle warmth. It is not dramatic. It does not need to be. Hunger makes simple flavors deeply satisfying. Around the fire, food begins moving quietly from hand to hand. Nobody appears to eat entirely alone. Sharing seems almost automatic. Modern hunter-gatherer societies often distribute food widely within the group, especially larger animals that would spoil quickly without refrigeration. Archaeological evidence cannot always reveal exactly how prehistoric meals were divided, but many researchers believe cooperation around food became one of humanity's defining characteristics. Exactly how equal those distributions were remains an open question. Age hunting skill, family relationships, pregnancy, illness, and local customs probably influenced who received what. Different communities almost certainly developed different traditions over thousands of years. You notice that children receive food already broken into smaller pieces. Older adults chew more slowly. Strong hunters eat steadily but without obvious celebration. The atmosphere feels peaceful rather than competitive. The crackling fire provides a gentle rhythm beneath quiet conversation. Occasionally, someone laughs softly after remembering an amusing moment from earlier in the day. Perhaps a bird stole part of someone's gathering basket. Perhaps a young hunter confidently tracked the wrong animal for an hour before realizing the footprints belonged to an unusually determined wild pig. The details hardly matter. The laughter does. Humour likely served ancient communities in ways modern science is only beginning to appreciate. Shared amusement reduces stress, strengthens social bonds, and helps difficult experiences fade into manageable memories. While prehistoric jokes have disappeared forever, the human instinct to smile together almost certainly stretches far beyond recorded history. A pleasant breeze stirs the smoke. It brushes lightly across your face before drifting toward the valley below. The stars overhead continue multiplying as true darkness settles completely across the landscape. Beyond the firelight, the surrounding world has almost vanished. Only sounds remain. Crickets maintain their patient chorus. Leaves rustle somewhere beyond sight. Far away, an owl calls once, then silence. Not empty silence. Living silence. Every sound carries information. Experienced ears distinguish harmless movements from unusual ones. A small animal searching for seed sounds very different from heavier footsteps moving deliberately through undergrowth. Night teaches careful listening because vision alone cannot answer every question. The meat finishes cooking. Small portions are passed around the circle. Unlike modern meals filled with dozens of ingredients, prehistoric dinners depended entirely upon what the landscape had offered that particular day. Some evenings brought abundant game. Others relied mostly upon gathered plants, nuts, seeds, or shellfish. Seasonal changes shaped every menu long before anyone invented recipes. Flexibility became survival. One remarkable discovery from archaeological sites suggests that early humans often enjoyed more varied diets than people once imagined. Microscopic plant remains trapped inside ancient dental plaque reveal surprisingly diverse meals including grasses, nuts, fruits, tubers, and medicinal plants. The stereotype of prehistoric people eating endless meat tells only part of the story. Nature offered variety. When people knew where to look, you slowly finish your portion, noticing how satisfying warm food feels against the cool night air. The heat spreads through your chest and stomach, easing the tiredness gathered during hours of walking, gathering, climbing, and carrying. The meal is ending. No one rushes away. Instead, people remain seated around the glowing fire hands stretched comfortably toward the warmth. Empty bones may later become useful tools. Nutshells return to the earth. Ash continues collecting quietly beneath burning logs, adding another thin layer to countless evenings already forgotten. Tomorrow will demand fresh effort, fresh searching, fresh uncertainty. But for now, nobody worries about sunrise. The camp is fed, the fire still burns, the night feels gentle, and in that simple circle of warmth surrounded by familiar faces and the endless darkness beyond you begin to understand that dinner was never only about eating, it was about belonging. Section 5. The last pieces of food disappear gradually rather than all at once. Nobody pushes back from the fire as though dinner has officially ended. Instead, the evening stretches onward with unhurried patience. A child absent-mindedly turns an empty shell in small fingers. An older hunter wipes grease from a stone blade using dry grass before placing it beside a bundle of tools. Somewhere across the camp, someone quietly hums a melody with no beginning and no obvious end. The meal leaves more than full stomachs. It leaves question. Who receives the largest portion? Who waits until everyone else has eaten? Who decides? These choices seem ordinary while you watch them unfold, yet they reveal something profound about human society. Long before laws were written or kingdoms appeared, food carried meaning far beyond nutrition. Every shared meal quietly reflected relationships, responsibilities, trust, and memory. You begin noticing details that would have escaped your attention only moments ago. A woman tears a roasted root into several smaller pieces before passing them to 3 children sitting close together. One of the youngest eagerly reaches for another piece only to pause after meeting the gentle smile of an older relative. There is no harsh correction. The child simply waits. Patience has been learned, not demanded. Nearby, an older man receives a particularly tender portion of meat. His hands move more slowly than those of the younger hunters, and one knee stiffens whenever he shifts his weight. You wonder whether he hunted successfully today. Perhaps he did not. Perhaps he no longer can. Yet nobody seems to question why he eats. Modern archaeology cannot always tell us exactly how prehistoric communities divided food, but discoveries from ancient skeletons offer remarkable clues about something equally important. Some individuals survived serious injuries that should have made independent hunting impossible. Broken bones healed. Missing limbs were adapted to. teeth disappeared years before death, yet those individuals continued living. Someone cared for them. For weeks, sometimes for years. That quiet evidence speaks volumes. You watch another exchange unfold near the fire. A successful hunter offers a thick strip of roasted meat to a woman tending a sleepy child. She accepts with a grateful nod before handing nearly half of it to someone sitting beside her. The food keeps moving, not randomly, purposefully. Anthropologists studying modern hunter-gatherer societies often observe extensive food sharing, particularly after successful hunts. Large animals provide more meat than one household can consume before spoilage begins. Sharing strengthens alliances, reduces future risk, and encourages cooperation when luck inevitably changes. Exactly how ancient communities organized these exchanges remains uncertain. Some scholars believe experienced hunters gained prestige through generosity rather than personal accumulation. Others argue that customs varied enormously between regions and cultures. The prehistoric world stretched across continents and countless generations, leaving little room for one universal rule. Still, one pattern appears repeatedly. Communities survive together, not alone. The fire crackles softly. A pleasant wave of warmth reaches your face while cool air brushes gently across your shoulders. Smoke rises almost straight upward tonight, suggesting calm weather. Above the camp, stars continue filling every corner of the sky until darkness itself seems woven from light. You cannot help noticing how close everyone sits. Modern people often imagine prehistoric camps filled with loud competition or constant arguments over resources. Certainly disagreements must have existed. Humans have never been perfect. Yet endless conflict would have been exhausting in groups that depended upon cooperation every single day. Trust had practical value, perhaps even greater than strength. Imagine refusing to share food during one successful hunt. What happens next week when you return empty-handed? Memory becomes part of every meal. Generosity travels forward through time. One curious idea proposed by several anthropologists suggests that regular food sharing may have encouraged the evolution of fairness itself. If survival depended upon repeated cooperation, individuals who consistently ignored communal expectations might eventually find themselves receiving less help when misfortune arrived. Historians continue debating exactly how these social pressures developed. The evidence is indirect, yet the possibility feels quietly persuasive. You glance toward the children again. Their meal has become something else entirely. One little boy carefully offers the final bite of his roasted root to an elderly woman beside him. She smiles warmly but gently nudges his hand back toward him instead. He laughs, then eats it himself. The exchange lasts only seconds. Still, it teaches more than words. Learning happens everywhere around the fur. Children observe not only how food is prepared, but also how kindness looks in practice. They notice who gives, who receives, who waits, and who quietly checks whether everyone has enough. Such lessons require no formal instruction. They become habits. Some researchers even wonder whether evening meals strengthened language itself. During daylight, hunting and gathering often demanded movement and attention. After sunset, however, people finally enjoyed uninterrupted opportunities for conversation. New words could spread naturally through stories, jokes, questions, and shared experiences. No one truly knows. Language leaves few fossils. Its earliest evenings disappeared into air thousands of generations ago. Yet it is difficult to imagine so many people sitting together night after night without speech becoming richer, more expressive and more creative. A faint breeze carries the smell of roasted marrow. Someone has cracked a long bone using a rounded hammerstone collected from a nearby riverbank. Inside lies rich, fatty marrow, one of the most energy-dense foods available to prehistoric communities. Nothing goes to waste. Bones become needles, antlers become tools, animal sinew becomes thread. Even hides drying near the fire will eventually become clothing blankets or shelter coverings. Modern people sometimes describe prehistoric life as primitive, yet the longer you watch, the more complicated it appears. Almost every object serves multiple purposes. Almost every resource continues its usefulness long after the meal ends. Efficiency grows from necessity. The firelight flickers across familiar faces. Some are weathered by decades beneath open skies. Others remain wonderfully young. Every face carries soot dust, tiny scratches and quiet satisfaction after another successful day. There are no mirrors reflecting appearances back at them. Identity comes from recognition rather than reflection. Someone begins softly imitating the call of a bird heard earlier that afternoon. Another responds with exaggerated seriousness. A ripple of laughter moves gently through the camp. Even humor becomes shared nourishment. Scientists studying laughter often describe it as social glue strengthening relationships without requiring complicated explanations. Although nobody can reconstruct prehistoric jokes, there is little reason to believe your ancestors spent every evening in solemn silence. Life remained difficult. Joy still found room. You stretch your legs toward the warmth. The muscles in your calves finally begin relaxing after hours of walking uneven ground. Your fingertips still carry traces of ash from helping arrange wood beside the fire. The rough texture reminds you that comfort often arrives through effort rather than convenience. Beyond the circle of light, darkness waits patiently. It does not feel threatening. Not tonight, because inside the camp something stronger than fear has taken shape. Belonging. Historians sometimes describe early human communities in terms of migration routes, stone technologies, or climate adaptation. Those subjects matter greatly. Yet perhaps one of humanity's greatest achievements leaves almost no physical trace at all. The simple decision to care whether everyone had eaten. No fossil preserves generosity. No ancient footprint records compassion. Archaeologists cannot excavate kindness from the earth, and yet its consequences may surround every successful camp they uncover. The fire burns a little lower. Nobody seems concerned. Has anyone concerned? Another log is quietly placed across glowing embers. Tomorrow will bring another hunt, another search, another uncertain day. Tonight, however, every shared meal has quietly reminded the group of a truth older than history itself. A full stomach is comforting. A shared one is civilization beginning to take shape. Section 6. The evening meal is ended, but no one disappears into sleep. The camp grows quieter rather than inactive. Around the fire, people naturally drift toward different tasks, each one gentle enough to match the peaceful rhythm of the night. The flames continue their patient dance, throwing warm light across familiar hands that have spent the entire day gathering, climbing, carrying, and hunting. Now those same hands begin making tomorrow possible. A smooth stone rests on someone's lap. Another stone rises. Tap, tap, tap. The sound is surprisingly delicate. It echoes softly through the camp without disturbing its calm. There is nothing hurried about the rhythm. Every strike has purpose and every pause carries quiet concentration. If you had wandered into this camp without understanding what was happening, you might mistake the sound for someone gently knocking on wood. Instead, history is being shaped, one careful flake at a time. You move a little closer to watch. The toolmaker turns a piece of flint beneath the firelight, examining its edges before striking again with a rounded hammerstone. A tiny shard breaks away, spinning briefly through the air before disappearing into the growing pile beside their feet. The blade becomes sharper. Only slightly. That slight difference matters. Tomorrow's hunt may depend upon it. Modern people often imagine prehistoric stone tools as rough, crude objects, but archaeologists know better. Many surviving spear points and blades display remarkable craftsmanship. Some were shaped with extraordinary precision, requiring dozens or even hundreds of carefully planned strikes. A single careless blow could ruin hours of patient work. Skill outweighs strength, always. The firelight makes the freshly exposed stone edges sparkle for a moment before fading back into grey. You notice that the toolmaker never strikes randomly. Every movement begins with observation. The stone is tilted, turned, studied. Only then comes another measured tap. Experience guides the hands, not force. Historians generally agree that stone knapping ranks among humanity's oldest and most influential technologies. Long before metal existed, carefully crafted stone tools allowed early humans to butcher animals more efficiently, shape wood, scrape hides, prepare plants, and defend themselves when necessary. Exactly how knowledge spread between different groups remains uncertain. Some researchers believe techniques has travelled through contact between neighbouring communities. Others argue similar methods emerged independently, because the physical properties of stone naturally encourage comparable solutions. Both possibilities continue to receive serious consideration. Whatever the answer, tonight's lesson unfolds without words. A young teenager watches closely, not interrupting, simply observing. Occasionally, the older craftsperson hands over the stone, allowing careful fingers to imitate what they have just seen. The first strike lands slightly off target. Nothing breaks. No one sighs impatiently. The older maker smiles almost invisibly before rotating the stone a few degrees and quietly handing it back. Another attempt. Better this time. Learning arrives through repetition, not perfection. Nearby, another person sharpens the tip of a wooden spear using a stone scraper rather than fresh cutting blows. Thin curls of pale wood fall silently onto the ground. Every few moments, the spear is held up against the firelight for inspection, its straightness checked with practiced eyes. The smell of fresh wood drifts gently through the smoke. It carries the hints of sap and damp bark. For a brief moment, the scent almost overpowers the fire itself, before the breeze changes direction once again. Some archaeologists believe prehistoric people occasionally hardened wooden spear tips by placing them near glowing embers rather than directly into flames. Gentle heating could remove moisture and strengthen certain woods without causing them to burn. Exactly how widespread this practice became remains debated, but several remarkable archaeological discoveries suggest surprisingly sophisticated woodworking long before metal tools appeared. Much of that ancient craftsmanship has vanished forever. Wood rarely survives thousands of years beneath the soil. Stone does, because of that simple accident of preservation. Modern museums display countless stone points while the wooden handles, shafts, baskets, and containers surrounding them often remain invisible to history. You find yourself appreciating something unexpected. Silence. Nobody competes for attention. Several different repair tasks happen simultaneously, yet the atmosphere feels wonderfully peaceful. Gentle tapping blends with quiet conversation. Someone occasionally brushes away stone flakes with the back of a hand. Another carefully twists plant fibre around a cracked spear shaft, testing its strength with slow pressure. The work almost resembles meditation. Every movement demands presence. Mistakes happen when thoughts wander. You notice small cuts across several pairs of hands. Not fresh wounds, old ones. Thin white scars crossing fingers and palms tell stories no one bothers to explain anymore. Sharp stone rewards patience while punishing distraction. Those tiny marks represent years of practice rather than failure. The fire pops softly. Everyone glances up, only for a heartbeat. Then attention returns to familiar tasks. One remarkable discovery has fascinated archaeologists for decades. Certain prehistoric stone tools were crafted from materials carried astonishing distances, sometimes more than 100 kilometers from their original source. Historians still debate exactly how those stones traveled. Perhaps groups exchanged valuable materials during seasonal gatherings. Perhaps families carried favored stone cores across generations of migration. Whatever happened, those journeys suggest something remarkable. People valued good tools enough to transport heavy stone over enormous distances. Quality mattered, even then. You reach down and pick up one tiny flake lying beside the toolmaker. Its edge surprises you. Although scarcely larger than your thumbnail, it feels sharper than many modern kitchen knives. Such razor-like flakes could slice meat plants, hide, or sinew with astonishing efficiency. Some may even have served briefly before being discarded, their simplicity making replacement easier than extensive maintenance. Small things. Great usefulness. A child crawls closer, fascinated by the growing collection of sparkling fragments. Before curious fingers reach too far, an older sister quietly redirects attention toward a smooth pebble instead. No harsh warning follows. Only gentle guidance. Children learn danger gradually, surrounded by patient watchfulness rather than constant fear. Across the fire, someone repairs a carrying net woven from twisted plant fibers. One loop has broken, probably while hauling gathered roots earlier that afternoon. The repair takes only minutes, yet tomorrow's harvest might depend upon that simple piece of craftsmanship. Historians often remind us that prehistoric technology extended far beyond stone tools. Baskets, ropes, clothing, slings, nets, digging sticks, wooden bowls, leather pouches, and woven mats probably surrounded daily life. Unfortunately, most of these objects disappeared long ago because natural materials decay so easily. The archaeological record is wonderfully informative and wonderfully incomplete. The camp grows even quieter. Some people have finished their repairs and now simply watch the flames. Others continue working beneath the warm orange light, determined to complete one final task before sleep. Nobody seems impatient. Tomorrow deserves preparation. The stars continue turning slowly overhead, though you barely notice their movement. Time here is measured differently. No clock marks the passing hours, instead the fire burns lower. Conversations soften and the night itself becomes the only calendar anyone needs. Your own hands rest comfortably against your knees. The warmth of the fire reaches your fingertips while cool air brushes lightly across your face. The rhythmic tapping of stone has become almost hypnotic, blending perfectly with distant insects and the occasional whisper of wind moving through nearby grass. Perhaps this is one reason evenings mattered so deeply. The urgent struggle for food had ended. The quieter work of improvement could begin. Every sharpened blade promised an easier hunt. Every repaired spear reduced tomorrow's risk. Every careful lesson shared beside the fire quietly strengthened the next generation. Civilization did not appear overnight. It emerged through countless evenings like this one, where ordinary people patiently made ordinary things just a little better than they had been before. The tapping grows softer. Fewer tools remain unfinished. One by one, completed blades are wrapped carefully in leather, or tucked safely beside sleeping places, waiting for another sunrise that will ask everything of them once again. Tonight, however, they have earned their rest. So have you. Section 7. The steady tapping of stone gradually fades into the background. One by one, the freshly sharpened blades are placed beside sleeping areas or tucked carefully into leather pouches. Spears lean against nearby rocks within easy reach. The busiest work of repairing tomorrow's hunting tools has quietly come to an end. Yet the evening still has more to offer. Not every important task involves stone. Some of the most valuable work in the camp leaves almost no trace for archaeologists to discover thousands of years later. You notice several people moving slightly farther from the brightest flames where the light remains warm but less intense. Their hands are busy with materials that seem almost ordinary at first glance. Animal hides folded neatly across their knees, bundles of dried grass, strips of bark, lengths of sinew, and handfuls of long plant fibers collected during the afternoon. Nothing here appears dramatic. Everything here is essential. A woman lifts a deer hide that has already been scraped clean days before. The leather is soft, but still slightly stiff in places. With slow practice movements, she works it back and forth between her hands, gently stretching the fibers while occasionally rubbing fat into the surface. The hide almost seems alive again, not as an animal, as something useful. The faint smell reaches you as the breeze shifts. It is earthy, slightly smoky. There is also a rich scent from the natural oils being worked into the leather, mingling with wood smoke and the cool fragrance of evening grass. It is a smell completely unfamiliar to most modern people, yet it would have surrounded your ancestors almost every day. You reach out to touch one finished hide lying nearby. Its surface surprises you. Warm from the fire, it feels softer than expected, with tiny variations in texture where the animal's life has quietly left its mark. No two hides are identical. Every scar, every change in thickness, every stretch of grain tells a silent story. Historians broadly agree that working animal skins became one of humanity's greatest survival skills, particularly as people spread into colder climates. Properly prepared hides provided clothing blankets, shelter, coverings, baby carriers, storage bags, and protective wrappings for valuable tools. Without them, many migrations might never have succeeded. Exactly how early humans softened leather remains an area of ongoing research. Different communities probably developed different techniques using animal brains, fat smoke plant extracts, or repeated stretching. Archaeological evidence offers valuable clues, but organic materials rarely survive well enough to reveal every step. Knowledge disappeared with the hands that practiced it. Only fragments remain. Nearby, another pair of hands begins twisting long strands of plant fiber together. The movement is almost hypnotic. Roll, twist, fold, repeat. A single strand snaps easily. Twisted together, dozens become remarkably strong. You watch the cord slowly lengthen across the worker's lap. At first it resembles nothing more than rough string. Then you begin imagining everything it might become. A fishing line, a carrying net, a bow drill, a basket handle, a belt. Bindings for a spear, or bands for a spear. Even the simplest cord quietly supports countless parts of daily life. Modern people often underestimate rope because it appears so ordinary. Yet some archaeologists describe cordage as one of humanity's invisible technologies. Unlike stone tools, ancient ropes usually rot away long before anyone can discover them. Their absence from the archaeological record makes prehistoric life seem simpler than it truly was. In reality, woven fibers probably surrounded people everywhere. You notice how different individuals specialize without announcing it. One person seems particularly skilled with hides, another works confidently with fibers. Someone else repairs woven baskets using thin, flexible branches collected near the river. No one gives instructions. The work flows naturally. Anthropologists studying traditional societies frequently observe that expertise develops through years of repeated practice rather than formal apprenticeship. Children begin by watching. Later they imitate simple movements. Gradually their hands remember what words could never fully explain. Tonight another lesson quietly unfolds. A young girl sits beside an older relative holding a small bundle of reeds. Her fingers move carefully but awkwardly as she attempts to braid them together. The first attempt loosens almost immediately. She frowns, only briefly. The older woman smiles and gently untangles the fibers without criticism. Again, this time more slowly. The second braid holds, not perfectly, but well enough. The girl's eyes brighten with quiet satisfaction before she begins another. No applause. Applause follows. No grand celebration. Progress itself is enough. The fire crackles gently behind you. Its warmth reaches your back while the cool night air brushes your face. Every few moments someone pauses to stretch stiff fingers before returning to steady work. The repetitive motions seem almost calming, matching the slow rhythm of breathing beneath the stars. One fascinating discovery from archaeological excavations suggests that prehistoric sewing needles appeared far earlier than many people once believed. Delicately shaped bone needles, complete with tiny drilled eyes, have been uncovered at several upper Paleolithic sites. These remarkable tools hint at clothing fitted more carefully than simple wrapped hides. Historians continue discussing exactly how widespread tailored garments became during different periods. Climate likely played a major role. Communities living through harsh Ice Age winters almost certainly invested tremendous effort into warm clothing, while groups inhabiting milder regions may have required far less. Adaptation always shaped technology, not fashion, although perhaps beauty mattered too. This idea once seemed unlikely to many researchers. Today, however, discoveries of bead shells, pigments, and decorative objects suggest prehistoric people cared about appearance as well as practicality. A fringe but intriguing hypothesis even proposes that certain patterns woven into clothing or bags may have carried symbolic meaning recognizable within particular groups. The evidence remains too limited for certainty, yet the possibility invites gentle curiosity. Humans rarely create only what is necessary. We also create what feels meaningful. Someone lifts a nearly finished carrying net toward the firelight. Its woven pattern forms neat diamond-shaped openings, each one remarkably even, despite being made entirely by hand. The net will soon carry roots, berries, shellfish, or perhaps even a sleeping infant nestled safely against a parent's back during long journeys. One object, many lives. The smell of smoke deepens slightly as another log settles onto glowing embers. Tiny sparks rise into the darkness before vanishing among the stars. The camp remains peaceful. Quiet conversation drifts gently from one side of the fire to the other, blending with insects singing beyond the circle of light. You become aware of another sensation. Touch. Nearly everything here depends upon it. Hands judge whether leather has become soft enough. Fingers detect weak spots in twisted cord. Palms recognize smooth stone. Skin feels changes in wind before weather arrives. Long before written measurements existed, human hands served as remarkably accurate instruments. Perhaps that explains why so much ancient knowledge proved difficult to preserve. Books can describe techniques. Only hands truly understand them. Archaeologists occasionally recover stone scrapers polished smooth from years of hide working. Under powerful microscopes, tiny wear patterns reveal the kinds of materials once shaped by their edges. From these silent traces, scientists slowly reconstruct forgotten evenings remarkably similar to this one. Yet so much remains hidden. Historians still debate whether certain sophisticated weaving techniques developed independently in different regions or spread through contact between distant communities. Organic fibers almost always disappear, leaving only indirect clues behind. Sometimes absence tells its own story. As the work continues, fewer voices can be heard. Not because anyone has grown lonely, because contentment rarely demands constant conversation. The repetitive motions settle the mind. Leather softens, cord lengthens, baskets become whole again. Tomorrow's burdens quietly grow lighter because tonight's patience is prepared for them. You glance around this camp one more time. The sharpened tools from earlier now rest beside newly repaired bags. Freshly woven cords lie coiled beside finished spears. Softened hides wait to warm sleeping bodies before dawn's chill arrives. Piece by piece, ordinary work has transformed scattered materials into comfort, security, and possibility. History often remembers great discoveries. It rarely remembers evenings like this. Yet civilization was stitched together not only by hunters and explorers, but also by patient hands working beside a quiet fire, twisting fibers or softening leather, and creating the simple objects that allowed every journey to continue. The stars shine silently overhead. The camp breathes together, and another night's work has quietly become tomorrow's survival. Section 8. The last strands of woven cord are carefully coiled and placed beside newly repaired baskets. Folded hides are stacked where they will remain dry until morning. One by one, hands finally become still. Yet the camp is far from silent. A different kind of work now gently moves toward the center of the fire. It is the work of caring. You notice the children first. Throughout the day, they seemed almost everywhere at once, chasing each other. Across patches of grass, watching adults with endless curiosity, gathering small sticks, collecting feathers, asking questions without words. Now, as the night deepens, that boundless energy begins to fade. One little girl leans sleepily against her mother's shoulder. A toddler curls into the lap of an older brother. Another child struggles to keep both eyes open, while stubbornly insisting on watching the fire for just a little longer. You smile quietly. Some things never change. No matter how many thousands of years separate you from this evening, children remain wonderfully predictable. After a long day of exploration, even the most determined eventually surrender to sleep. The warmth of the fire reaches the center of the camp most strongly, and that is exactly where the youngest gather. It is not an accident. Adults have arranged themselves almost naturally into a loose circle around them, creating an invisible wall of familiar faces between the children and the darkness beyond. Protection takes days. Sometimes it is simply proximity. The smell of smoke lingers gently in the air, mixing with softened leather-roasted fruits and the faint sweetness of crushed grasses spread across sleeping places. The scents have become so familiar that they no longer demand attention. Instead, they create something surprisingly comforting. The camp smells like home. A woman gently brushes dirt from a child's tangled hair using nothing more than her fingers. Another quietly checks a baby's small feet after a day of being carried across rough ground. Nearby, someone wraps a soft hide around a sleeping infant before tucking its edges beneath tiny shoulders. The movements are slow, almost ceremonial. No one appears rushed. Modern life often treats bedtime as another task to complete before tomorrow arrives. Here evening unfolds without clocks. The children become sleepy when their bodies decide it is time. Adults respond with patience rather than schedules. Historians generally agree that childcare in prehistoric societies was rarely the responsibility of only two parents. Anthropologists studying modern hunter-gatherer communities frequently observe what researchers call cooperative childcare. Grandparents, older siblings, aunts, uncles, and unrelated adults all contribute in different ways to raising children. Some scientists even argue this shared approach helped shape human evolution itself. Our unusually long childhood may have become possible because entire communities participated in caring for the young. Exactly how similar every prehistoric group was remains uncertain. Different environments almost certainly encouraged different family structures. Some camps may have relied heavily upon extended relatives, while others formed close bonds between unrelated individuals traveling together. The archaeological evidence offers intriguing clues without revealing every detail. One thing seems remarkably clear. Children rarely grew up alone. A young boy wanders toward the edge of the firelight, fascinated by dancing shadows stretching across nearby rocks. Before he reaches complete darkness, an older woman softly calls his name. She does not sound frightened, only gentle. He pauses, looks back, then quietly returns. The lesson requires only a few words. Some places are safe, some are not. You begin noticing how often learning continues even now, long after the day's gathering and hunting have finished. One child carefully imitates an adult's way of sitting, close enough to feel warm without touching the flames. Another practices tying a simple knot using scraps of plant fibre left over from earlier work. A third proudly carries a tiny bundle of twigs no heavier than a loaf of bread, helping feed the fire despite contributing only a handful of fuel. Nobody laughs. The effort matters more than the result. Psychologists today often describe childhood as a period of guided participation where young people gradually become capable by joining real activities rather than completing artificial exercises. Watching the camp around you, it becomes easy to imagine that this approach stretches deep into humanity's past. Children learn because they belong, not because they attend lessons. A little farther from the fire, two older siblings quietly entertain the youngest members of the group. One folds broad leaves into the shape of a small animal. The other imitates the hopping movement of a rabbit disappearing into tall grass. Soft laughter follows. Briefly, then calm returns. Some anthropologists believe simple forms of play served far more than amusement. Pretending to stalk animals, copying bird calls, balancing across fallen logs, or throwing small sticks toward imaginary targets may all have quietly prepared children for adult responsibilities years later. Exactly which games existed tens of thousands of years ago remains impossible to know. Play leaves few fossils. Its echoes survive only through a careful imagination supported by what children everywhere continue to do today. The fire crackles softly. Tiny sparks arise. A sleepy baby stirs. Almost immediately, gentle hands lift the child against a warm shoulder. Quiet humming replaces restless movement. The melody contains no recognizable words, only flowing sounds that rise and fall like the evening breeze. Lullabies may be among humanity's oldest traditions. No one can prove exactly when people first sang babies to sleep. Songs vanish the moment they are finished unless someone remembers them. Yet nearly every culture known today has created gentle melodies for restless children. Perhaps that tradition began long before history itself. One fascinating hypothesis suggests that rhythmic vocal sounds helped calm infants while simultaneously reassuring nearby adults that everything remained peaceful. Historians continue exploring how early music developed, but many agree that the human voice likely served emotional purposes long before formal language became fully developed. The melody fades gradually. The child sleeps. You glance upward. The stars appear impossibly bright now. Without artificial light, the sky resembles a vast river of silver stretching endlessly across the darkness. Some children follow the glowing band overhead with heavy eyes before sleep quietly overtakes them. Do they wonder about those lights? Almost certainly. Do they invent stories? Perhaps. Historians still debate when humans first connected stars with myths, ancestors, or imagined figures. The evidence remains elusive. Yet curiosity requires no written tradition. A child staring upward beside a warm fire needs only imagination. The air grows cooler. Adults pull sleeping children slightly closer beneath softened hides. Shared body warmth becomes another quiet resource carefully managed through the night. Babies remain near mothers. Older children nestle beside siblings or grandparents. The camp itself seems to gather inward, becoming smaller as darkness deepens around its edges. You notice something remarkable. Although every adult appears relaxed, someone is always awake enough to notice small changes. A child coughing, a blanket slipping, a baby turning over. Care never fully sleeps. Modern neuroscience tells us that humans are unusually attentive to the sounds made by children, particularly while resting. Whether this sensitivity evolved gradually through countless generations of communal living remains an active area of research. Whatever the explanation, the scene before you feels entirely natural. Responsibility moves quietly through the group. Without announcement, without reward, the last whispers of conversation soften into comfortable silence. Children breathe slowly beneath warm hides. Their faces glow gently in the fading firelight, untouched by tomorrow's worries. They know nothing of archaeological discoveries, evolutionary theories, or future civilizations. They know warmth, safety, familiar voices. For tonight, that is enough. As you watch the smallest members of the camp drift peacefully into sleep, you begin to understand something deeply reassuring. Humanity did not survive simply because people became clever hunters or skilled toolmakers. It survived because evening after evening someone paused their own work to comfort a frightened child. Someone stayed awake a little longer. Someone carried the youngest when tiny legs grew tired. Someone quietly believed that tomorrow mattered enough to protect those who would inherit it. The fire burns steadily, the children sleep, and the future of humanity rests peacefully within the circle of light. Section 9. The youngest children now should sleep beneath warm hides, their breathing slow and steady against the quiet rhythm of the fire. The camp has grown noticeably calmer. Conversations have softened into low murmurs. Even the laughter from earlier in the evening has settled into comfortable silence. Yet the night is never completely still. Somewhere beyond the glow of the fire, a twig snaps. Everyone hears it. No one startles. An experienced hunter briefly lifts his head, listens for another moment, then calmly returns to scraping the edge of a wooden bowl. Whatever caused the sound has already moved on. A small animal, perhaps. The forest is full of tiny noises that mean nothing. Still listening has become second nature, and tonight another quiet responsibility waits beside the fire. Someone needs care. Near the edge of the camp, an older woman sits with one leg stretched carefully before her. You noticed earlier that she walked more slowly than everyone else while returning from the stream. Now beneath the warm light, another member of the group gently examines her swollen ankle. There is no panic, only patience. The younger woman runs careful fingers along the joint, pressing lightly, before stopping whenever discomfort appears. She says little. Her hands seem to know what they are searching for long before words become necessary. The ankle is wrapped, not tightly, just enough. A strip of softened hide is wound around it with practiced care before being secured using thin plant cord prepared earlier that evening. It is a simple treatment, but perhaps an effective one. Modern medicine often feels impossibly distant from this quiet moment. Yet archaeology repeatedly reminds us that prehistoric people were far from helpless when illness or injury appeared. Ancient skeletons reveal healed fractures, repaired bones, and individuals who survived serious accidents that would have been impossible without long periods of assistance. Healing leaves evidence. Kindness does too. You move a little closer. Beside the fire rests a small collection of plants gathered during the afternoon. Most resemble nothing more than ordinary leaves, roots, and bark. To unfamiliar eyes, they appear almost identical. To experienced eyes, they are entirely different. One root carries a sharp, peppery scent. Another smells slightly sweet. A handful of crushed leaves releases a cool fragrance when rubbed gently between careful fingers. Exactly how prehistoric people discovered the medicinal properties of plants remains one of history's greatest mysteries. Some knowledge surely emerged through generations of careful observation. Other discoveries may have happened almost accidentally. Animals themselves may even have provided clues. Modern scientists have documented chimpanzees, elephants, and several bird species consuming specific plants when ill. Perhaps your ancestors watched closely. Perhaps they learned. Historians continue debating how extensive prehistoric medical knowledge truly became. While evidence suggests surprising sophistication in some areas, researchers remain cautious about assuming too much from limited discoveries. The truth, as so often happens in prehistory, probably varied from one community to another. A young hunter approaches the fire carrying his left arm slightly differently from the right. Not dramatically, just enough for you to notice. He lowers himself carefully onto a flat stone, while another man examines a long scratch running across his forearm. It is shallow but dirty after a full day outdoors. Without hesitation, water is poured gently across the wound. The dirt washes away. Tiny droplets catch the firelight before disappearing into the dry earth beneath his feet. The cut looks cleaner now. Someone presses crushed leaves against it. Another wraps the arm loosely with soft bark fibre. The entire process unfolds quietly. No audience goes, no audience gathers. No heroic speeches are given. Helping one another seems as ordinary as preparing dinner or gathering firewood. One fascinating archaeological discovery comes from evidence of prehistoric dental care. Several ancient teeth have been found showing signs of deliberate treatment, while others reveal surprisingly skilled drilling techniques performed thousands of years before written history. Historians still disagree about exactly why some procedures were performed. Pain relief, infection, ritual. The answers remain incomplete. Even so, they reveal something remarkable. Early humans did not simply accept suffering whenever possible. They experimented, they adapted, they tried. The smell of crushed herbs briefly overpowers the smoke drifting from the fire. It is fresh, almost mint-like, though unlike any plant you recognize today. The cool fragrance lingers only a moment before fading once again into the familiar scent of wood ash and warm leather. Nearby, someone gently massages tired shoulders after the day's long walk. No injury, just exhaustion. Strong fingers press slowly along tight muscles before moving toward the neck and upper back. The recipient closes tired eyes for a moment, breathing more deeply as the stiffness gradually eases. Perhaps massage itself has ancient origins. No one can know exactly when humans first realized that gentle pressure eased aching muscles. It may be one of those discoveries so obvious that it happened countless times in countless places without ever leaving a trace. Not every useful invention survives in stone. Some survive only through touch. The fire settles lower. Glowing embers replace dancing flames. Their softer light fills the camp with a deep orange warmth instead of bright flickering shadows. An older man coughs quietly. The sound echoes only briefly before disappearing into the night. A younger woman hands him a warm drink prepared from steeped leaves gathered earlier that day. Whether the mixture truly eases his throat or simply offers comfort remains impossible to know. Perhaps both. Modern medicine recognizes something prehistoric communities almost certainly understood through experience. Care itself heals. Not every illness can be cured. Not every injury can be repaired. Yet companionship reduces fear, encourages rest, and gives the body its best chance to recover. Scientists today often describe the importance of social support during healing. Looking around this fire, you realize that lesson may be far older than civilization. A curious idea occasionally discussed by anthropologists suggests that caring for injured individuals may have strengthened cooperation throughout human evolution. Communities willing to support temporarily weakened members would preserve valuable experience and knowledge instead of losing it whenever accidents occurred. Historians continue examining this possibility. The archaeological evidence remains persuasive but incomplete. Still, the healed skeletons discovered across Europe, Africa, and Asia quietly suggest that compassion was not rare. It endured, across generation. You notice a small child stirring beneath a blanket of softened hide. Without fully waking, the child reaches sleepily toward a nearby adult. A reassuring hand gently settles across the little shoulder. Almost instantly breathing, once more. No words, just reassurance. The camp itself seems to breathe together now. Smoke rises lazily into the clear sky. Crickets continue their endless evening chorus beyond the circle of warmth. Somewhere in the distance, water flows over smooth stones with a sound almost too soft to hear. The stars remain bright overhead. One older woman quietly rearranges the herbal bundle before placing unused leaves back into a woven pouch. Nothing is wasted. Plants gathered with effort during daylight are treated with quiet respect. Tomorrow they may be needed again. Knowledge lives in memory, not books. Every generation carries precious understanding that cannot simply be written down. Which bark eases fever, which root causes sickness, which leaf helps clean a wound. Every answer depends upon people remembering. One forgotten lesson could carry real consequences. As the evening drifts gently onward, the camp grows still once more. The swollen ankle has been wrapped. The scratched arm now rests comfortably beside the fire. The warm drink has soothed the old man's cough. Tired muscles have relaxed beneath patient hands. No miracle has occurred, only care. And perhaps that has always been one of humanity's greatest strengths. Long before hospitals, long before physicians, long before medicine became a science, people watched over one another. They noticed pain. They offered comfort. They shared knowledge gathered across countless evenings remarkably similar to this one. The embers glow softly. The air smells of smoke and healing herbs. The night stretches peacefully beyond the firelight. And within its warm circle, survival depends not only upon strength, but upon the quiet kindness of hands willing to help another heal. Section 10. The wrapped ankle now rests comfortably near the edge of the fire. The young hunter flexes his bandaged arm, satisfied that tomorrow's work will still be possible. One by one, those who had been quietly caring for others settle back into their places around the glowing embers. The camp grows quieter still, not because everyone has fallen asleep, because listening has become more important than speaking. You become aware of it gradually. At first, you notice only the absence of conversation. Then, one by one, individual sounds emerge from the darkness as though the night itself has been patiently waiting for your attention. A cricket sings, another answers somewhere farther away. Leaves brush softly together high above your head as a gentle breeze wanders through the trees. Tiny insects drift through the warm air surrounding the fire, occasionally crossing the orange glow before disappearing once more into darkness. Every sound has its place. Every silence does too. During the day, your eyes do most of the work. At night, your ears quietly become the most trusted guide. Long before electric lights illuminated every corner of the world, early humans depended upon hearing in ways that many modern people rarely experience. You close your eyes for a moment. Immediately, the camp feels larger. The fire crackles just ahead. Someone slowly shifts their weight on a bed of dried grass to your left. A child sighs gently in sleep somewhere behind you. Far beyond the firelight comes the distant rush of water flowing over smooth stones. The landscape has become a map of sound. Archaeologists cannot excavate ancient noises yet. Anthropologists often remind us that prehistoric people lived within remarkably rich acoustic environments. Without engines, machinery, aircraft, or electronic devices, natural sounds travelled much farther through forests and grasslands than they often do today. A snapping twig carried meaning. So did sudden silence. You notice one of the older hunters slowly lifting his head, not dramatically, just enough. He listens towards the darkness beyond the camp for several long moments before lowering his gaze again. Nobody asks what he heard. Nobody needs to. It was nothing important, or perhaps nothing unusual. Experience has taught everyone that reacting to every sound would waste precious energy. Instead, people learn patterns. They recognize the ordinary rhythms of the landscape until anything unfamiliar quietly announces itself. That knowledge cannot be rushed. It requires years, perhaps decades. A fascinating study of modern hunter-gatherer communities has shown that experienced trackers can often identify animals simply from the rhythm of distant footsteps or subtle disturbances in vegetation. Historians continue discussing how similar these abilities may have been among prehistoric populations, but few doubt that careful listening formed an essential survival skill. The night rewards patience, not panic. The smell of smoke drifts gently past your face before fading into cool air. Beneath it comes another scent. Moist earth. Perhaps dew has begun settling across the grass beyond the warmth of the fire. The ground slowly releases the heat collected throughout the afternoon, and with it rises the unmistakable fragrance of damp soil. You inhale deeply. The air feels fresh. Cool against your lungs. Nearby, someone quietly adds another small branch to the embers. Not enough to create towering flames. Only enough to keep the glow alive. The branch catches slowly. First smoke, then a faint orange edge, finally gentle flame. Its soft light reaches only a short distance into the surrounding darkness. Beyond that invisible boundary, the world belongs to creatures whose lives begin when yours begins winding down. Some are harmless. Many remain unseen. A tiny rustling comes from deep by bushes. This time several people hear it. No one moves. The sound continues for a few seconds before stopping entirely. Perhaps a hedgehog. Perhaps a rabbit. Perhaps only the wind nudging dry leaves against one another. Without daylight certainty, comes rare. You realize something quietly remarkable. Early humans almost certainly resisted the temptation to investigate every mysterious noise. Curiosity has value, but unnecessary movement at night carries risks. Better to observe, better to listen, better to allow the darkness to reveal its own answers whenever possible. Historians broadly agree that prehistoric people probably knew their local environments with astonishing detail. They recognized seasonal bird calls, the movement of migrating animals, and even the different voices of changing weather. One owl might simply be hunting. A flock of frightened birds, however, could signal something much larger moving through the forest. Patterns matter. One unusual call means little. Several together deserve attention. The stars overhead appear almost impossibly bright now. Without modern light pollution, the Milky Way stretches across the sky like pale smoke drifting between invisible worlds. Some adults occasionally glance upward before returning their attention to the sounds surrounding the camp. Did they navigate by stars? Almost certainly. Did they understand the heavens the way later civilizations would? Historians still debate exactly when detailed astronomical traditions first developed. Seasonal observations almost certainly existed very early. More elaborate constellations and mythologies may have emerged gradually across thousands of generations. The evidence leaves room for wonder, not certainty. A cool breeze brushes gently across your arms. The temperature has dropped noticeably since sunset. You pull a softened hide a little closer around your shoulders. Its familiar texture still carries the faint scent of smoke from countless evenings spent beside similar fires. Warmth feels different now, more precious. Beyond the circle of light, darkness seems almost tangible. Not frightening, simply vast. A child stirs quietly before rolling closer to an older sibling. Neither fully wakes. Shared warmth solves the problem before anyone needs to speak. The camp has become wonderfully efficient. Every small adjustment happens almost automatically. Listening continues. Always listening. One particularly interesting hypothesis proposed by several anthropologists suggests that early humans may have developed exceptionally strong auditory memory compared with many people today. Living in environments where sound carried critical information could have rewarded individuals who remembered subtle differences between familiar and unfamiliar noises. Exactly how much these abilities differed from ours remains impossible to measure. Modern life has changed our senses in countless quiet ways, yet perhaps those ancient skills still linger beneath the surface, waiting for moments when the world finally grows quiet enough to hear them. You notice another sound. Breathing. Not your own. The steady rhythm of dozens of sleeping companions surrounds you like gentle waves upon a shoreline. Some breathe deeply, others more softly. Together they create a comforting background unlike anything found in solitude. You are not alone. The realization brings unexpected peace. For much of human history, sleeping entirely alone would have been unusual and perhaps even unsettling. Community offered protection, warmth, companionship, and countless extra ears listening throughout the night. The fire crackles once more. A tiny shower of sparks drifts upward. They disappear among the stars before your eyes can follow them completely. Far away somewhere beyond the valley, a wolf howls. Just once. The sound hangs briefly in the cool air before fading into silence. Nobody reaches for a weapon. Nobody panics. Several adults simply listen until the echoes disappear. The howl is distant, far enough away. For now, historians generally agree that large predators shaped prehistoric behavior in countless subtle ways. Wolves, lions, hyenas, bears, and big cats shared many of the same landscapes occupied by early humans. Exactly how dangerous each species proved varied enormously by region and period. The relationship was never simple. Sometimes competition, sometimes avoidance, occasionally perhaps cautious curiosity. Tonight, however, the fire still burns steadily. The camp remains calm. The distant howl becomes just another thread woven into the endless fabric of the prehistoric night. You continue listening. The earth continues speaking. And little by little you begin realizing that survival depended not only upon seeing the world clearly, but also upon hearing everything it quietly wished to say. Section 11. The distant wolf's howl fades into the cool night air, until only the steady chorus of insects remains. No one in the camp speaks about it. There is no need. Every person around the fire has heard similar sounds many times before. The wilderness is never truly silent, and the people who live within it have learned an important lesson. Not every danger requires action. Some only require awareness. The fire burns lower, now glowing more than blazing. Thick logs have collapsed into a bed of deep orange embers, sending gentle warmth across the sleeping camp. The brightest flames have given way to a softer light that barely reaches the nearest trees. Darkness presses closer, yet no one appears uneasy. You begin noticing something that had escaped your attention throughout the evening. The camp has not been arranged randomly. Sleeping places form a loose circle around the fire. Spears lean within easy reach of several adults rather than being gathered into one pile. Heavy logs and large stones mark the outer edge of the campsite, creating subtle boundaries without forming actual walls. Protection is everywhere. It simply looks ordinary. Modern people often imagine prehistoric camps surrounded by dramatic barricades or constant armed patrols. Reality was probably much quieter. Most nights passed without confrontation. Still, preparation quietly accompanied every evening, because nobody knew which night might prove different. Preparation becomes habit. Habit becomes survival. An older hunter slowly stands, not because anything's wrong, only because it is time to stretch tired legs. He walks once around the edge of the firelight, pausing briefly to look toward the open valley, before continuing past the shelter where several children now sleep soundly beneath layered hides. His footsteps make almost no sound. Even dry leaves barely whisper beneath his feet. You wonder whether he volunteered for this task, or whether everyone simply understands whose turn it is. Historians continue debating exactly how prehistoric communities organized nighttime watchfulness. Some anthropologists suggest formal shifts may have developed in larger or more permanent camps. Others believe lighter, naturally staggered sleep patterns allowed different people to remain awake throughout the night, without strict schedules. The archaeological record offers few direct answers. Sleep leaves little evidence, yet common sense suggests someone usually remained alert. The responsibilities are too important. The hunter kneels near the edge of the campsite and gently touches the ground. The soil still feels warm from the afternoon sun, although coolness has begun settling across its surface. He looks toward a narrow game trail disappearing between scattered trees. Nothing moves. Satisfied, he quietly returns toward the fire. No announcement follows. His calm tells everyone everything they need to know. The breeze changes direction. Smoke now drifts toward the northern edge of camp instead of across the center. You notice another adult quietly shifting a sleeping child's blanket to keep the thickest smoke away from small lungs. Even the wind shapes decisions. Many predators possess remarkable senses of smell, far better than those of humans. Smoke likely carried advantages as well as disadvantages. Some animals probably avoided it. Others may simply have recognized it as part of the landscape. Historians still discuss exactly how effective campfires were at discouraging different predators. The answer almost certainly depended upon the animal and the circumstances. A curious but plausible theory suggests that maintaining several smaller fires around larger camps may occasionally have created wider circles of light and scent. Evidence for this practice remains limited, however, and many archaeologists caution against assuming it was common. One dependable fire would already demand considerable effort. Several would require much more fuel. The fire crackles gently. A shower of sparks drifts upward. For a brief moment, they resemble tiny stars climbing back toward the heavens. You pull the softened hide a little closer around your shoulders. Its warmth feels especially welcome now that midnight approaches. The cool air settles into the valley, wrapping itself around rocks, grasses, and sleeping bodies alike. The scent of dew grows stronger. Moisture quietly gathers on leaves beyond the warmth of the camp. Somewhere in the darkness comes a soft snort. This time the sound is closer. Several heads lift almost simultaneously. Nobody reaches for panic, only attention. The older hunter slowly turns toward the sound, while another quietly places one hand upon a nearby spear. No sudden movements, no whispered warnings, only listening. A few long moments pass. Then another snort follows, accompanied by the gentle rustle of grass. The sound moves sideways rather than forward. Perhaps a deer, perhaps a wild horse. Large herbivores often traveled at night to avoid daytime heat or biting insects. Experienced ears could distinguish their steady movements from the cautious approach of predators. Gradually the sounds fade. The hands resting on spear shafts relax once more. The conversation never needed to stop because it had never truly begun. You realize that guarding the camp rarely resembles dramatic heroics. Instead, it depends upon recognizing ordinary patterns. The unusual reveals itself by interrupting the familiar. Anthropologists studying indigenous tracking traditions often describe awareness as a broad, relaxed attention rather than intense concentration. Instead of focusing upon one detail, experienced observers notice many small changes unfolding together. The prehistoric night likely rewarded exactly this kind of awareness. Calm, patient, continuous. Across the fire, one woman quietly rearranges several burning logs. Not because they are dying, because she wants more glowing embers than open flames. Too much light can reduce your ability to see beyond the fire's edge. Softer illumination allows eyes to adjust more naturally while still providing warmth. Whether prehistoric communities deliberately managed fires this way remains uncertain. Some researchers believe practical experience naturally encouraged such adjustments. Others caution that different groups probably preferred different methods depending upon weather, available fuel, and local dangers. The uncertainty itself feels appropriate. Not every ancient decision can be reconstructed. A sleeping child murmurs softly. An older sister gently rests a hand across the child's back without fully waking. The movement lasts only seconds. Then stillness returns. Protection here extends beyond predators. It includes comfort. The stars wheel slowly overhead. You cannot perceive their motion directly. yet somehow the sky feels different from earlier in the evening. One bright constellation has climbed higher above the eastern horizon, while another slowly disappears behind distant hills. Perhaps someone notices, perhaps not. The Earth continues turning, whether watched or ignored. A remarkable archaeological discovery from southern Africa suggests that humans were using coastal caves for repeated occupations well over 100,000 years ago. Such places offered natural shelter from weather and sometimes reduced exposure to large predators. Elsewhere, open camps across grasslands demanded different strategies entirely. There was never one perfect home, only good choices, made repeatedly. You listen again. The camp breathes together. Fire whispers softly beneath collapsing logs. Insects continue their endless chorus. Water murmurs somewhere beyond the trees. The wind carries the faint smell of pine mixed with smoke and damp earth. Everything feels balanced. You begin understanding that survival did not always depend upon fighting danger. Far more often it depended upon avoiding unnecessary risks altogether, choosing the right campsite, keeping tools nearby, watching the fire, listening carefully, sleeping together. These quiet habits rarely appear in legends, yet they allowed legends to exist at all. The older hunter settles once more beside the glowing embers. His brief circuit around the camp is complete. Another adult remains awake nearby, absent-mindedly feeding a small branch into the fire, while gazing toward the darkness with relaxed eyes. No formal handover occurs. Awareness simply continues, like the fire itself, passed gently from one person to another. Without interruption, the night stretches onward across forests, rivers, and endless stars. Within its vast silence, the camp remains small, warm, alert, and wonderfully alive. Section 12. The older hunter settles comfortably beside the glowing embers, and another adult quietly takes over the simple responsibility of watching the fire. No signal marks the change. No one announces that one watch has ended and another has begun. The night simply continues, like a river flowing around smooth, stony. The camp has become wonderfully still. Most of the children are asleep now, wrapped securely beneath softened hides. Gentle breathing rises and falls throughout the circle of resting families, blending with the endless music of crickets beyond the firelight. You notice something curious. Not everyone is asleep. Not at the same time. One woman quietly stretches her legs before adding another branch to the embers. Across the fire, an older man leans back against a smooth boulder, his eyes open as he studies the stars overhead. Nearby, a younger hunter, who had seemed deeply asleep only moments ago, now sits upright, rubbing warmth back into his hands before quietly drinking from a skin of water. No one appears surprised. It feels perfectly ordinary. For much of modern history, many people have imagined that healthy sleep means one long uninterrupted stretch from evening until morning. Yet historians studying medieval records, anthropologists observing traditional societies, and sleep scientists alike have begun questioning whether this pattern has always been universal. Perhaps it has not. Some researchers suggest that before widespread artificial lighting, many communities naturally experienced what has become known as segmented sleep. People often rested for several hours after sunset, woke quietly for a period during the middle of the night, and then drifted back into a second period of sleep before dawn. As historians continue debating how common this pattern truly was, the evidence grows stronger for certain historical periods. For prehistory, however, certainty remains impossible. Still watching the camp around you, the idea feels surprisingly believable. The fire itself encourages gentle wakefulness. Its warmth draws people close while it's slow fading, occasionally invites someone to stir just a log or simply enjoy a few peaceful moments before lying down once more. You pull your hide a little tighter around your shoulders. The leather feels wonderfully warm where it has absorbed heat from the fire, while the outer surface remains cool beneath your fingertips. A faint scent of smoke lingers within the fibers, comforting rather than unpleasant. The ground beneath your bedding feels firm, yet not uncomfortable. Earlier in the evening, fresh grasses were spread beneath the sleeping places, creating a thin layer of insulation between resting bodies and the cool earth. Archaeological discoveries from ancient caves have uncovered evidence of deliberately prepared bedding, made from grasses, reeds, and leafy plants. Some of those plants appear to have possessed natural insect-repelling properties. Whether prehistoric people intentionally selected them for this reason remains uncertain. Historians continue examining microscopic plant remains preserved beneath ancient sleeping areas, piecing together clues from materials almost too fragile to survive. The answers arrive slowly. Like everything else in prehistory, a child rolls gently in sleep. Almost immediately, an older brother shifts closer, sharing warmth beneath the same blanket of hide. The movement happens without either child fully waking. Bodies adapt instinctively, finding comfort through contact rather than conscious effort. Warmth has become communal, not private. Modern sleep researchers often note that body temperature naturally falls during the night, making warmth an important part of comfortable rest. For prehistoric communities living without heated homes, sleeping near trusted companions offered practical advantages far beyond emotional reassurance. Shared warmth conserved energy. Energy meant survival. You glance toward the fire. Its bright flames have nearly disappeared now, replaced by deep beds of glowing coals. They radiate gentle heat in every direction without producing excessive smoke. Every so often, someone quietly adds another small branch rather than a heavy log. The goal is no longer brightness, only continuity. The embers resemble tiny stars scattered across the earth, reflecting the great river of light stretching overhead through the Milky Way. For a peaceful moment, sky and fire seem almost connected. One above, one below, both ancient. A faint breeze slips through the camp. It carries cool air across your face while gently stirring loose strands of hair. Somewhere nearby, dried grasses whisper against one another before becoming still once more. The sound barely lasts a second, yet everyone hears it. Life in the prehistoric world teaches remarkable sensitivity to ordinary sounds. Even while resting, the mind never completely abandons its awareness of the surrounding landscape. Modern neuroscience suggests that humans continue monitoring important environmental cues during sleep, particularly unfamiliar noises. Perhaps that quiet vigilance reaches back countless generations. Some sleep, others listen. Together the group remains protected. A fascinating study of Hadza hunter-gatherers in Tanzania found that across an entire community there were surprisingly few moments when everyone slept simultaneously. Older adults often remained awake later or rose earlier, while younger individuals followed different rhythms. Researchers nicknamed this pattern the poorly sleeping grandmother hypothesis. The name may sound playful. The idea itself is surprisingly elegant. Different sleep schedules naturally ensure that someone is almost always awake without requiring strict guard shifts. Historians remain cautious about applying modern observations directly to prehistoric populations. Different climates, different cultures, different circumstances, yet the possibility offers an intriguing glimpse into how human communities may have balanced rest with security. Across the fire, the older man who had been watching the stars quietly lies down at last. Almost immediately, another adult awakens. No conversation passes between them. No agreement is spoken. The rhythm simply continues. Watching this exchange, you realize how beautifully ordinary it feels. Nobody seems burdened by responsibility because responsibility belongs to everyone. The night is shared. Just like food, just like fire, just like stories. You close your own eyes briefly. The sounds surrounding you become even clearer. The slow breathing of nearby sleepers, the faint crackle of settling embers, a distant owl calling once before silence returns, water moving patiently over stone somewhere beyond the darkness. The world has not become quieter, only your attention has changed. Historians generally agree that prehistoric people probably enjoyed fewer hours of artificial activity after sunset than modern societies do. Yet fewer hours awake did not necessarily mean less meaningful evenings. Instead, wakefulness and rest likely flowed together in gentle cycles shaped by darkness, temperature, weather, and communal needs. There is something comforting about that thought. Sleep arrives naturally, not by force. A young woman wakes quietly, drinks a little water, glances toward the fire and gently places another branch upon the glowing coals. She sits for several minutes, simply watching. Perhaps she thinks about tomorrow's journey. Perhaps she remembers a story told earlier in the evening. Perhaps she thinks of nothing at all. Historians cannot know. Neither can you. The uncertainty feels peaceful. Slowly she lies down once more beside her family. The fire continues glowing. The stars continue turning. The earth continues breathing beneath every sleeping body gathered within the warm circle of camp. You begin to understand that the prehistoric night was not divided into neat hours measured by clocks. It unfolded as a living rhythm where sleep and wakefulness gently exchanged places without urgency. Someone always rested. Someone always watched. Someone always dreamed. And together they carried the camp safely through the longest hours before dawn. Section 13. 13 Soul. The glowing embers pulse softly beneath a blanket of pale ash, radiating enough warmth to keep the night's chill at a comfortable distance. Around them, the camp has settled into its quietest hour. Some people sleep deeply. Others drift in lighter rest, waking briefly before surrendering once more to dreams. The world feels wonderfully still. Yet even before anyone closes tired eyes, another important decision has already been made. Where to sleep. It sounds like the simplest choice imaginable. Find a place. Lie down. Rest. For your ancestors, however, choosing a sleeping place was one of the most important decisions of every single day. A poor choice might mean a cold, uncomfortable night. A dangerous choice could mean something far worse. You look around the camp again. Now that most people are lying down, the careful arrangement becomes easier to understand. The youngest children occupy the warm centre nearest the fire. Older adults rest nearby where they can easily respond if a child wakes or the fire begins fading. Strong hunters and experienced adults tend to sleep slightly closer to the outer edge, not because they are ordered to, but because their places naturally suit the needs of the group. No one draws a map. The pattern simply emerges, like birds arranging themselves upon branches. The ground beneath your bedding feels surprisingly thoughtful. Earlier in the evening, grasses were spread carefully across the earth. Small stones were removed. Sharp sticks discarded. Even the slight slope beneath your body allows cool night airs to drift gently downhill rather than collecting around the sleeping camp. Such details matter. Modern archaeologists often discover repeated layers of occupation within ancient caves and rock shelters. The same places were returned to season after season, sometimes for thousands of years. This suggests that prehistoric people recognized good sleeping locations and remembered them remarkably well. A successful campsite became valuable knowledge, passed from generation to generation. The cave nearby offers one obvious advantage. Its stone walls reduce the wind. The overhanging rock keeps rain away should weather change unexpectedly during the night. Even the entrance faces toward the morning sun, allowing warmth to reach the camp soon after dawn. None of these features happened by chance. Someone noticed them, long ago. Perhaps many people did. Exactly how often early humans preferred caves over open camps remains an area of active research. Popular imagination often places prehistoric people inside caves almost constantly, yet archaeological evidence suggests many groups spent large portions of their lives beneath temporary shelters or in open-air camps. Caves preserve history well. Open camps often disappear. Because stone shelters protect bones, tools and hearths from weather, archaeologists naturally discover them more often. Historians continue reminding us that this preservation bias may distort our understanding of prehistoric life. Your ancestors likely lived beneath the open sky far more frequently than museums sometimes suggest. A cool breeze slips gently through the valley. It brushes across your face before disappearing into the darkness beyond the firelight. You notice that the camp sits just above the lowest part of the landscape. That small difference in elevation matters. Cold air sinks. Experienced people know this without needing meteorology. Camping directly within the valley floor often means waking to colder temperatures, heavier dew, and thicker morning fog. A slightly raised position remains drier and warmer throughout the night. Knowledge grows from observation, repeated endlessly. One older woman quietly adjusts the edge of a hide covering the entrance to a simple windbreak, constructed from branches and woven reeds. The shelter barely reaches shoulder height when standing, yet it blocks enough wind to make the resting place noticeably more comfortable. Comfort requires effort, even here. Archaeological discoveries reveal surprising evidence of prehistoric architecture. Wooden posts, mammoth bones, branches, hides, and woven vegetation all contributed to shelters adapted for different climates. Unfortunately, many of these materials decay quickly, leaving only faint traces beneath the soil. Stone survives, wood rarely does. As a result, the prehistoric world often appears emptier than it truly was. You reach beneath your hand and feel the bedding itself. The grasses remain springy despite supporting sleeping bodies for several hours. Tiny seed heads brush softly against your fingertips. They smell faintly sweet, warmed by lingering heat from the fire. One fascinating excavation in South Africa uncovered bedding layers composed of carefully selected grasses dating back more than 70,000 years. Some plants appear to have contained natural insect-repelling compounds, though historians still debate whether people intentionally chose those species for their protective qualities or simply gathered what grew nearby. Perhaps both explanations hold some truth. Human decisions rarely have only one reason. Across the fire, a young hunter turns over in sleep. His spear rests within easy reach, not clutched tightly, simply nearby. Several other adults have arranged their tools in similar ways. Stone blades remain protected inside leather coverings. Carrying bags rest beneath heads or beside bedding. Water skins sit close enough to find without searching in complete darkness. Everything has its place. Morning arrives more easily when nothing is misplaced. You begin noticing another subtle detail. Nobody sleeps directly against the fire. Close enough for warmth, far enough for safety. The distance feels almost instinctive. Children cannot accidentally roll into glowing embers. Sparks carried by unexpected gusts of wind lose much of their heat before reaching blankets. Smoke drifts upward, rather than collecting around sleeping faces. Generations of experience have quietly determined these invisible boundaries. A remarkable aspect of prehistoric life is how much practical knowledge existed without written instructions. Nobody carved yet a safe sleeping distance into stone. Instead, every evening reinforced habits through observation. Children watched. Adults demonstrated. The camp remembered. Some anthropologists suggest that human culture itself can be understood as a vast collection of learned habits passed across generations. Fire placement, bedding, preparation, shelter orientation, and sleeping arrangements all belong to this invisible inheritance. Most of it leaves no direct fossil, yet its influence shaped every night. The stars continue turning overhead. The fire has become little more than glowing coals, now casting a soft orange halo across nearby faces. Shadows no longer dance dramatically. Instead, everything feels wonderfully calm, wrapped in gentle half-light. The smell of smoke has mellowed. Now damp grass becomes more noticeable. A faint scent of leather rises whenever someone shifts beneath a blanket. Somewhere beyond the camp, wild mint crushed beneath unseen animal feet briefly perfumes the passing breeze. The landscape continues breathing. So do you. Historians still argue about one particularly intriguing question. Did early humans deliberately return to favourite sleeping places because they felt emotionally attached to them, or simply because those locations offered practical advantages? The two ideas need not compete. Safety often creates affection. Places that repeatedly protect families naturally become meaningful over time. Perhaps your ancestors loved certain valleys not only because they contained water, shelter and food, but because generations of children had laughed. Their elders had shared stories there, and countless peaceful nights had unfolded beneath familiar stars. Home begins somewhere. Even before villages exist, a sleepy child murmurs softly. An older woman instinctively reaches across the bedding and gently adjusts the blanket without opening her eyes completely. The gesture lasts only seconds. Then stillness returns. The camp feels settled, balanced, ready. You understand now that sleep itself was never left entirely to chance. Every evening required dozens of thoughtful decisions long before anyone rested their head upon softened grass. Where the fire would burn, where the children would sleep, where tools would remain, where the wind would pass, where morning sunlight would first arrive. Each quiet choice increased the likelihood that everyone would awaken safely together. The embers glow gently. The earth cradles the sleeping camp, and beneath an endless, prehistoric sky you discover that even something as ordinary as choosing a place to rest became another remarkable expression of human wisdom patiently refined across countless forgotten nights. Section 14. The camp rests peacefully beneath a sky overflowing with stars. The fire has become a quiet circle of glowing embers casting just enough light to soften the darkness without chasing it away completely. Around you, sleeping bodies rise and fall with slow, steady breaths. The day's work has faded into memory. Now another journey begins, not across valleys, not over mountains, but inward. You close your eyes. The sounds of the camp remain close for a little while. Crickets continue their endless chorus. Somewhere far beyond the firelight, water slips patiently around smooth stones. A cool breeze brushes gently across your cheek before disappearing into the sleeping grass. Then something changes. The boundary between waking and sleeping becomes wonderfully uncertain. Every human being who has ever lived has crossed this invisible threshold. Long before the first cities, before farming, before pottery, before written language, your ancestors almost certainly entered the strange landscape we now call dreams. Exactly what they experienced remains one of history's greatest mysteries. Dreams leave no fossils. They cannot be excavated from ancient caves or preserved beneath layers of ash. Yet because dreaming appears to be a universal feature of the human brain, few historians doubt that prehistoric people dreamed just as vividly as you do tonight, perhaps even more vividly. Their waking world already felt deeply connected to nature, animals, weather, and the endless sky. Sleep may have carried those experiences into places where memory and imagination quietly blended together. Your breathing slows. The warmth of the fire lingers beneath your blanket of softened hide while cool night air brushes lightly across your forehead. Your body grows heavier. Your mind grows lighter. Modern neuroscience tells us that dreams often weave together fragments of recent experience. A face seen during the day appears beside a place remembered from childhood. Familiar sounds become unfamiliar stories. The sleeping brain quietly rearranges memories without asking permission. Perhaps the same happened here. The deer you tracked this afternoon may return in your dreams, only now it speaks. Or perhaps it disappears into the stars. A child who laughed beside the fire may suddenly appear fully grown. A river crossed yesterday becomes an endless ocean. Dreams obey different rules. Always have. Historians still debate how early humans understood these strange nighttime experiences. Did they believe dreams were messages, memories, journeys, conversations with ancestors? We simply do not know. Written explanations would not appear for many thousands of years. Yet one thing seems almost impossible to imagine, that people ignored them. Dreams feel too powerful, too emotional, too mysterious. Across nearly every recorded culture, dreams have carried meaning. Some societies treated them as guidance. Others saw warnings, opportunities, or glimpses into unseen worlds. The remarkable consistency of this fascination suggests that humanity's relationship with dreaming may stretch far deeper than history itself. A gentle sigh escapes someone's ear. The sound blends effortlessly into the soft crackling of the embers. You remain suspended between wakefulness and sleep, neither fully here nor fully elsewhere. One particularly intriguing hypothesis proposed by several anthropologists suggests that storytelling and dreaming may have influenced one another throughout human evolution. Dreams produce surprising images and impossible events. Stories preserve and reshape those images once morning arrives. Historians continue exploring this possibility. Evidence remains indirect, yet it is difficult to imagine ancient storytellers never borrowing from their own sleeping minds. Perhaps one evening, someone dreamed of a great bird carrying the sun across the sky. The next morning, the dream became a story. Years later, it became tradition. Generations afterward, nobody remembered where it had begun, only that it mattered. The stars continue turning silently above the camp. One bright shooting star briefly crosses the darkness before vanishing behind the western hills. Nobody notices. Everyone is asleep, or nearly everyone. One older woman opens her eyes for a moment, glances towards the glowing fire, gently adjusts the hide covering her shoulders and drifts back into sleep almost immediately. The transition looks effortless. Scientists today recognize that sleep itself unfolds in repeating cycles throughout the night, moving through lighter and deeper stages before returning again. Dreaming most commonly occurs during rapid eye movement sleep, although dreams may arise during other phases as well. Prehistoric brains almost certainly followed similar rhythms. The biology is ancient, far older than civilization. You find comfort in that thought. Across hundreds of thousands of years, beneath countless unfamiliar skies, sleeping minds continued creating invisible worlds every single night. Some dreams were joyful, others unsettling. Most disappear before sunrise. A cool breeze stirs the fire. Tiny sparks rise into the darkness like glowing insects before fading completely. For an instant, they resemble wandering spirits climbing toward the stars. It's easy to understand how such sights might inspire imagination. The prehistoric night invited wonder. Without electric lights, the heavens dominated every evening. Without written explanations, mystery remained an ordinary part of life. A dream following such a night may have felt inseparable from the living landscape surrounding the camp. The owl's distant call might appear again while sleeping. The wolf heard earlier may return as a silent companion rather than a threat. A mountain glimpsed during daylight could become impossibly tall. Dreams transform reality, not by replacing it, by reshaping it. One remarkable archaeological discovery hints that symbolic thinking flourished surprisingly early in human history. Engraved patterns, painted caves, carved figures, and carefully buried objects all suggest minds capable of rich imagination. Exactly how dreams influenced that symbolic world remains impossible to prove. Historians still argue whether certain ancient artworks reflected waking rituals, dream experiences, or entirely different ideas. The truth may include all three. Human imagination rarely fits into neat categories. Your own thoughts begin drifting more slowly. The warmth beneath the blanket feels heavier now. The sounds surrounding the camp grow softer, not because they have disappeared, but because your attention gradually releases them. Breathing, embers, wind, water. Everything blends together. One child murmurs quietly in sleep, perhaps chasing something unseen, perhaps laughing. No one can know. No. Across the fire, an older hunter briefly smiles while sleeping, the expression lasting only a heartbeat before fading once more into peaceful stillness. Even dreams leave traces, tiny ones. Modern researchers occasionally observe facial expressions, small movements, and whispered sounds during sleep. Although we cannot know what any individual dream contains, the sleeping body sometimes reveals that an unseen story continues behind closed eyes. The prehistoric night holds countless such invisible stories. None survive. All mattered. Historians often remind us that the emotional lives of early humans were almost certainly as rich and complicated as our own. They loved, they feared, they remembered, they hoped. Their dreams likely reflected those same emotions, quietly stitching together experiences too large for waking thought alone. The embers glow lower still. Soon the first hint of dawn will begin its long journey toward the eastern horizon. But not yet. For now, the camp remains wrapped in peaceful darkness. Bodies rest. Minds wander. Dreams quietly unfold beyond the reach of history. And somewhere inside those forgotten nights beneath skies brighter than any you have ever known, humanity continued discovering not only the world around it, but also the mysterious landscape waiting patiently behind closed eyes. Section 15. The dreams of the camp drift silently through the darkest hours before dawn. Around the fading embers, sleeping bodies remain wrapped in softened hides, rising and falling with slow, peaceful breaths. Above them, the stars continue their patient journey across the sky, indifferent to the passing of countless generations. Then, almost without noticing, you begin moving backward through memory. Not your own memory, human memory. Because long before written books preserved history, before symbols were carved into stone, before anyone imagined an alphabet, the past survived in a different way. It survived through voices. The fire before you is quiet now, but only a few hours earlier, it was the brightest place in the camp. Around it, people ate together, repaired tools, comforted children, and watched sparks rise toward the stars. What happened after that? What filled the hours before sleep finally arrived? Perhaps conversation, perhaps silence, most likely both. You imagine the fire burning a little brighter earlier in the evening before everyone settled into bed. The youngest children sit nearest the warmth, leaning against parents or grandparents. Older hunters stretch tired legs after walking many miles across rough ground. Someone absent-mindedly turns a smooth stone over in patient hands while watching the flames dance. Nobody seems hurried. The day's work is finished. Tomorrow has not yet begun. It is the perfect moment for stories. Modern hunter-gatherer societies often use evenings as valuable social time. After daylight responsibilities fade, people gather to share experiences, laughter, practical advice, and traditional knowledge. Anthropologists have observed that nighttime conversations frequently become less concerned with immediate survival and more focused upon relationships, memory, morality, and imagination. Historians believe prehistoric evenings may have served similar purposes. Exactly what those stories sounded like, however, remains beautifully unknown. No recordings exist. Chords exist. No written pages survive. Only possibilities. One older woman lifts her hand toward the stars, not pointing at a specific constellation, simply tracing gentle patterns through the air while several children watch with heavy but curious eyes. Perhaps she is describing a journey taken many winters ago. A distant valley. A river that flooded unexpectedly. A mountain where unusually large animals gathered every spring. The story entertains. It also teaches. Knowledge hidden inside my memory travels farther than commands ever could. You notice that nobody interrupts. Even the youngest listeners remain remarkably still. Humans seem naturally drawn toward stories. Neuroscientists today explain that narratives help organize information into memorable patterns. Instead of remembering isolated facts, the mind remembers people, places, choices, and consequences. Perhaps your ancestors discovered this without ever realizing they had. A warning becomes easier to remember when wrapped inside an adventure. A lesson survives longer when accompanied by laughter. One fascinating theory proposed by evolutionary anthropologists suggests that storytelling itself may have strengthened cooperation within early human communities. Shared stories create shared identities. They help individuals understand expectations, celebrate generosity, remember danger, and imagine futures beyond immediate experience. Historians continued debating exactly when the storytelling became fully developed. Language evolved gradually. Narrative likely did as well. Yet somewhere during evenings remarkably similar to this one, simple descriptions must have grown into richer tales, one memory leading naturally to another. The fire crackles softly. A child yawns. Someone smiles. The storyteller pauses just long enough to let anticipation quietly settle over the group before continuing. Good storytellers understand silence, even before writing existed. Across the fire, one young hunter begins demonstrating the movements of an unusually clever deer encountered earlier that afternoon. He exaggerates each cautious step until the children giggle softly beneath their blankets. His companions laugh too. Not at him, with him. The performance grows increasingly playful. He imitates the animal lifting its nose into the breeze, freezing dramatically whenever an imaginary twig snaps beneath invisible feet. Everyone recognizes the moment. Many were there. The memory belongs to all of them. Humor probably occupied an important place within prehistoric evenings. While archaeologists cannot uncover ancient jokes, laughter itself appears to be deeply rooted within human biology. It strengthens social bonds, reduces tension, and encourages trust among companions. The oldest joke has disappeared forever, its laughter has not. You find yourself smiling along with everyone else, not because the performance is extraordinary, because it feels familiar. Thousands of generations separate you from these people, yet someone perceived pretending to be an overly cautious deer remains strangely timeless. The breeze shifts. Smoke drifts gently across the storyteller before curling upward into the star-filled sky. The scent of burning oak mingles with softened leather-dried grasses and the faint sweetness of roasted roots lingering from dinner. The entire camp feels wrapped inside warmth. Not only physical warmth, social warmth. A younger woman now speaks quietly. Unlike the playful hunter, her story seems slower, more thoughtful. She describes a distant waterhole visited during childhood where birds always arrived before sunrise. She remembers which trees offered shade during the hottest months and which rocky hillside echoed strangely after heavy rain. Every detail matters. Not because it is exciting, because someone may need that knowledge someday. Anthropologists often describe oral tradition as one of humanity's greatest survival technologies. Before maps existed, stories preserved landscapes. Before calendars, they remembered seasonal changes. Before textbooks, they explained useful plants, dangerous animals, migration routes, and family histories. Memory became a library. People became its shelves. Historians still argue over how accurately oral traditions preserved information across many generations. Some evidence suggests remarkable consistency. Other examples reveal stories changing gradually as they passed between storytellers. Perhaps both are true. Essential lessons remain. Smaller details drift gently with time. One particularly intriguing hypothesis suggests that some myths may preserve surprisingly ancient memories of real events, including volcanic eruptions, changing coastlines, or dramatic environmental changes experienced thousands of years earlier. The idea remains controversial. Evidence exists. Questions remain. Like so much of prehistory, certainty stays just beyond reach. The fire burns lower. Its bright flames settle into glowing orange coals. Conversation softens naturally. Stories become short. Long pauses appear between them without feeling awkward. Nobody seems uncomfortable with the silence. Perhaps silence belongs within storytelling as much as words themselves. You glance upward. The stars appear exactly as they did when the evening began, yet somehow they feel different now. After hearing memories shared beside the fire, the sky itself seems connected to those unseen journeys across valleys, rivers, forests, and seasons. The world grows larger through auroras, not smaller. A sleepy child quietly asks a question. The adults chuckle gently before someone offers an answer. Whether the answer is entirely true hardly matters tonight. Its purpose is comfort, wonder, connection. The child smiles sleepily before nestling beneath a warm hide once more. Scientists studying childhood development often note that bedtime stories help young minds organize experience, process emotion, and strengthen memory. Watching the prehistoric camp around you, it becomes tempting to imagine that this tradition reaches astonishingly deep into humanity's past. Perhaps the very first bedtime story was told beside a fire much like this one. No one will ever know. The possibility alone feels comforting. The oldest voices disappeared long ago, yet their echoes remain. Every time people gather after sunset, every time families laugh together, every time an elder begins with quiet words inviting others to listen, the embers continue glowing softly. The storyteller's voice gradually fades into peaceful silence. One by one, listeners close tired eyes. Tomorrow will bring another day of walking, gathering, watching, and learning. Tonight, however, history has travelled not through stone tools or footprints, but through gentle voices carried across the darkness. The stories themselves have vanished. The human need to tell them never has. Section 16. The final storyteller falls quiet. For a few lingering moments, no one speaks. The only voice left belongs to the fire itself. A glowing branch shifts gently beneath its own weight, sending a handful of tiny sparks spiraling upward before disappearing into the immense darkness above. The camp listens, not because anyone expects another story, but because silence too has something to offer. You settle a little deeper into the bedding of woven grasses and softened hides. Their familiar textures have become almost invisible now, no longer demanding attention. The warmth beneath your body feels reassuring, while the cool night air brushing your face reminds you that the world beyond the fire remains vast and untamed. The contrast is comforting. Warmth, coolness, safety, mystery. Every prehistoric evening contained both. Your eyes drift upward once more. The stars seem brighter than ever. Without cities, highways, or electric lights, the night sky stretches from one horizon to the other in astonishing detail. Thousands upon thousands of stars crowd together, their pale light forming great rivers across the heavens. The Milky Way arches overhead like a luminous path connecting distant worlds. For your ancestors, this view was ordinary, yet it was never ordinary. It greeted every generation. Modern astronomers estimate that under truly dark skies, the unaided human eye can detect several thousand stars at once. Many people today have never experienced such darkness. Artificial lighting has gradually hidden much of the celestial landscape from everyday life. Your ancestors knew a different sky, one impossible to ignore. A young woman lying near the edge of the camp opens her eyes briefly. She does not appear restless. She simply watches. Her gaze follows a familiar group of bright stars climbing slowly above the eastern horizon. Whether she knows them as individual patterns, seasonal markers, or something entirely different, you cannot tell. Historians cannot know Ishiro either, yet archaeological evidence strongly suggests that early humans paid close attention to the heavens. Long before written astronomy, people observed, repeatedly, patiently. One of the world's oldest known examples of intentional lunar markings may date back tens of thousands of years. Some carved bones bear repeated notches that a few researchers believe could represent moon phases or seasonal counting. Others argue the marks served entirely different purposes. The debate continues. The mystery survives. Even without certainty, few scholars doubt that changing skies influenced human life. The moon affected nighttime brightness. The stars shifted gradually with the seasons. Certain constellations rose before dawn at predictable times of year. Nature provided a calendar, not on paper, but overhead. The moon tonight hangs low above the distant hills, only partly illuminated. Its gentle silver light reaches the valley beyond the fire, but leaves the camp itself comfortably shadowed. You notice how different the landscape appears beneath moonlight. Sharp edges soften, colours fade into shades of grey. Large rocks resemble sleeping animals until your eyes adjust. Trees become graceful silhouettes against the sky. Everything familiar becomes slightly mysterious. Many nocturnal animals also respond to the moon's changing brightness. Modern ecological studies show that predators and prey often adjust their behaviour according to lunar phases. Brighter nights can make hunting easier for some species while exposing others to greater danger. Your ancestors almost certainly noticed these patterns, perhaps without ever measuring them. Experience became observation. Observation became expectation. A gentle breeze carries the scent of damp earth across the camp. The temperature has fallen noticeably since midnight. You instinctively pull the hide closer around your shoulders, appreciating once again the remarkable skill required to transform animal skins into comfortable coverings. Nearby, someone quietly feeds another small stick into the glowing embers. Not enough to create bright flames, just enough to maintain warmth until morning. The movement is almost automatic. It has likely been repeated thousands of evenings before this one, and thousands afterward. Looking upward again, you wonder whether anyone here invents stories about the stars. It feels almost inevitable. Across history, people from every inhabited continent eventually imagined hunters, animals, rivers, spirits, heroes, birds and monsters among the constellations. The specific stories differed enormously, yet the impulse remained remarkably consistent. Humans search for patterns. The sky offers countless opportunities. Did prehistoric people recognize familiar shapes overhead? Probably. What names they used, however, have disappeared forever. Perhaps a cluster of stars reminded them of migrating geese. Another resembled the antlers of a great deer. Another marked the direction toward distant mountains remembered from childhood. The exact stories are gone. The habit of storytelling remains. One particularly intriguing archaeological site in Germany contains an ivory carving of a lion-headed human figure dating back roughly 40,000 years. The sculpture suggests astonishing imaginative abilities among Ice Age people. Whether its creator connected such beings with dreams, rituals, stories, or the stars is impossible to determine. Historians continue exploring every possibility. The answers remain beautifully incomplete. You feel no frustration about that, only curiosity. The prehistoric sky invites question more readily than certainty. A meteor suddenly flashes across the darkness. Its bright trail lasts barely a second before fading completely. Several people remain asleep. One older man notices. He watches the empty sky for another moment before quietly smiling to himself. No explanation follows. Perhaps none is needed. Meteor showers, eclipses, auroras, and brilliant planets have been visible throughout human history. Every generation encountered these extraordinary events without modern scientific explanations. Yet wonder does not require misunderstanding. Even today, knowing what a meteor is does not diminish its beauty. The same was likely true then, only differently. The stars continue their slow procession toward the western horizon. Although impossible to detect moment by moment, their movement gradually transforms the sky. Experienced travelers could likely recognize these changes instinctively, using familiar stars to estimate the passing hours or anticipate approaching dawn. Exactly how sophisticated such knowledge became during different prehistoric periods remains uncertain. Different communities probably develop different traditions. Knowledge grows where it proves useful. The camp itself reflects the heavens in unexpected ways. Just as stars gather into loose clusters across the sky, families gather around the glowing fire below. Brightness surrounded by darkness. Connection surrounded by distance. The pattern feels strangely comforting. You begin understanding that looking upward was never simply entertainment. It encouraged patience, perspective, humility. Every difficult journey, every successful hunt, every joyful reunion unfolded beneath the same ancient sky. Children grew into elders beneath it. Seasons returned beneath it. Entire generations lived and died while the constellations continued their patient cycles overhead. The heavens became one of humanity's oldest companions. Silent, reliable, endlessly fascinating. The fire burns lower still. Soon the eastern horizon will begin changing almost imperceptibly. Morning waits beyond the darkness. But not yet. For a little while longer, the prehistoric world belongs entirely to the stars. You breathe slowly. The night feels infinite. And somewhere between the glowing embers below and the glittering heavens above you realize that your ancestors were never truly alone. The earth rested beneath them. The sky watched over them, and every clear night invited them to look upward with the same quiet wonder that still lives within us today. Section 17. The stars still shine brilliantly above the sleeping camp, but something almost too subtle to notice has begun to change. The darkness is no longer growing deeper. It has reached its quiet limit. Far beyond the eastern hills, where earth and sky meet in a line too distant to see clearly, the first invisible promise of morning has begun its slow approach. No one can say it, no one can see it yet, but the world already knows. Already knows. The air feels different. It has become cooler than at any other point during the night. Tiny droplets of moisture gather silently upon blades of grass, smooth stones, and the broad leaves of nearby shrubs. When you reach a hand outside your blanket, your fingertips immediately sense the dampness settling over everything beyond the warmth of the fire. The earth has been quietly breathing all night. Now it exhales the coolness stored beneath the stars. A faint mist begins forming in the lowest part of the valley. Not thick enough to hide the landscape, only enough to soften it. The distant trees lose some of their sharp edges, becoming gentle silhouettes suspended within pale grey air. Experienced eyes would not find this surprising. They have seen it many times before. Long before meteorology became a science, your ancestors understood weather through careful observation. They noticed where fog gathered first, which valleys remained damp after sunrise, how different winds carried different scents, and how clouds behaved before storms arrived. Knowledge arrived one morning at a time. Repeated, compared, remembered. One older woman slowly opens her eyes. She does not sit up immediately. Instead, she simply listens. The camp remains peaceful. The fire has settled into a broad bed of glowing coals beneath a thin layer of white ash. Only an occasional flicker of orange appears where hidden embers continue their patient work. She smiles softly. The fire survived the night. So did everyone else. Without saying a word, she reaches toward a nearby bundle of carefully gathered twigs. One by one, she places them gently across the embers. Not too many. Not too quickly. The fire wakes gradually, just as the people soon will. A thin ribbon of smoke curls upward before disappearing into the still morning air. Its scent feels slightly different now. Cooler. Cleaner. The moisture settling through the valley softens the sharper smell of burning wood, replacing it with the fresh fragrance of damp earth and crushed grass. You breathe deeply. Morning has its own perfume. It always has. Nearby, a child shifts beneath a blanket of hides but continues sleeping peacefully. Another rolls over, pulling one arm free before tucking it back beneath warm coverings without opening sleepy eyes. Even in sleep, bodies respond to changing temperatures. Modern sleep scientists have found that our internal body clocks respond to subtle environmental cues long before we consciously awaken. Gradually changing light, cooler temperatures before dawn and the natural rhythm of hormones all help prepare the body for morning. Your ancestors experienced these rhythms without interruption. No alarm clocks, no glowing screens, only nature. Historians believe this close relationship with natural cycles profoundly shaped daily life. Sunrise and sunset were not merely convenient times to begin or end work. They were the framework around which existence unfolded. One fascinating observation made by anthropologists studying several hunter-gatherer communities is that people often awaken gradually rather than simultaneously. There is rarely a single moment when an entire camp suddenly springs into action. Morning unfolds, like a flower opening. Across the fire, an older hunter quietly sits upright. He stretches slowly, lifting both arms toward the fading stars before rubbing warmth back into tired shoulders. The movement is completely unhurried. No urgency exists yet. There is still time. He glances toward the eastern horizon. It remains dark, but perhaps not quite as dark as before. Human eyes are remarkably sensitive to gradual changes in light. Even before the first visible glow of dawn appears, subtle shifts begin influencing the brain. Exactly how consciously prehistoric people perceived these early transitions is impossible to know. Perhaps they barely noticed. Perhaps they noticed immediately. Either way, their bodies almost certainly responded. A small bird suddenly chirps once from somewhere beyond the trees. Silence returns. Then another answers from farther away. Soon a third drone. The dawn chorus has begun. Modern ornithologists explain that many birds become active before sunrise because the cool morning air carries sound efficiently while low light still limits feeding opportunities. Singing first allows birds to establish territory and communicate before the day's busiest hours begin. Your ancestors probably never studied the biology. They simply knew. Birdsong meant morning approached. The older hunter listens carefully. His face brightens almost imperceptibly. The birds have confirmed what the stars already suggested. Night is ending. Another fascinating clue arrives upon the breeze. The insects that filled the darkness with constant music throughout the evening have grown noticeably quieter. Their chorus has not disappeared completely, but long pauses now separate the remaining calls. One orchestra finishes, another prepares to begin. You begin hearing sounds hidden beneath the insects all night. The quiet movement of water, the distant rustle of leaves, the gentle crackling of waking fire. Morning does not replace the night. It slowly rearranges its voices. Historians often remind us that prehistoric people experienced environmental change with extraordinary intimacy. Small differences in sound, scent, temperature, or animal behavior could influence decisions about hunting, traveling, gathering plants, or remaining in camp. Awareness itself became a survival skill. Not anxious awareness, patient awareness. A young woman wakes and immediately reaches toward a nearby water skin. She drinks slowly before passing it to an older relative without either needing to speak. The exchange feels effortless. Husana practices through countless similar mornings. Nearby, someone quietly folds a blanket of hides while another gently brushes dried grass from clothing. The camp awakens almost invisibly. Nobody rushes. The youngest children continue sleeping. Adults know they will wake soon enough. One particularly intriguing archaeological question concerns how prehistoric people measured time before formal calendars and clocks. While historians cannot offer a single answer, many believe natural events, birdsong, sunrise, moon, phases, flowering plants, animal migrations, and seasonal stars formed an intricate system of environmental timekeeping. Nature became the clock. Everyone learned to read it. You notice that the eastern sky has finally begun changing. Not dramatically, only a whisper of pale blue hidden beneath the blackness. The brightest stars still shine overhead. Others have quietly disappeared without your noticing exactly when. The transition feels seamless, just like sleep giving way to waking. The fire now burns with gentle yellow flames once more. Warm hands gather near it. Sleepy smiles appear. Someone laughs softly after a child yawns so widely that everyone nearby cannot help smiling in return. Another night has passed successfully. No celebration follows. None is needed. Survival has always consisted largely of ordinary mornings. Thousands upon thousands of them. Each one beginning just like this, with cool air, gentle light, shared warmth, and the quiet certainty that a new day waits patiently beyond the edge of the rising sun. Section 18. The pale blue glow along the eastern horizon grows a little brighter with every passing moment. It does not rush. It simply expands gently, pushing back the darkness that has wrapped the valley throughout the night. One by one, the stars begin to disappear, not because they have gone anywhere, only because the daylight slowly outshines them. The camp awakens just as gradually. Nobody announces the beginning of the day. Morning needs no invitation. The fire now fed with several larger pieces of wood burns with cheerful yellow flames once again. Fresh smoke rises straight upward into the cool, still air before the first warming breezes of the morning have a chance to scatter it. The warmth reaches your hands almost immediately. You hold them towards the fire, feeling stiff fingers slowly come back to life after the coldest hours before dawn. Around you, the sleeping camp begins transforming into a working community. An older woman carefully folds several blankets of softened hide, shaking away bits of dry grass before stacking them neatly beside a smooth boulder. Nearby, 2 younger adults gather the woven sleeping mats that had insulated everyone from the cool ground throughout the night. Nothing is thrown carelessly aside. Everything has value. Animal hides required many hours of scraping, stretching, softening, and smoking. Woven grasses had been gathered, dried, and carefully prepared. Every useful object represented time, skill, and effort. Respect for possessions came naturally. Replacing them was never easy. A sleepy child rubs tired eyes before wandering toward the fire still wrapped inside an oversized hide that trails behind like a tiny cloak. Several adults smile quietly as the child settles beside the warmth, stretching both hands toward the flames, exactly as countless mornings before. The routine feels timeless, perhaps because it is. Modern archaeologists often emphasize that prehistoric life was not composed entirely of dramatic hunts and dangerous encounters. Much of every day consisted of ordinary tasks repeated again and again, maintaining tools, preparing food, repairing clothing, collecting fuel, and caring for one another. History often remembers extraordinary moments. Life is mostly ordinary ones. The eastern sky now glows with gentle shades of lavender and pale gold. The first direct rays of sunlight have not yet reached the valley floor, but the highest branches of distant trees begin catching soft light from beyond the hills. The forest awakens before the camp. Birdsong grows richer. What began as a few scattered calls before dawn has become a lively chorus echoing across the landscape. Small birds dart between branches searching for insects awakened by the growing warmth. Somewhere overhead, larger wings beat steadily as a hawk glides silently across the brightening sky. The world is returning to motion. You notice several adults quietly walking beyond the edge of camp. Not far, only to inspect the surroundings. One checks the nearby stream. Another studies the ground along yesterday's game trail. Fresh tracks have appeared overnight. Small hoofprints, perhaps several rabbits. The faint impression of a fox. Nothing alarming, just information. Experienced hunter-gatherers likely began each morning by reading the landscape almost as easily as you might read a newspaper today. Overnight rain, fresh animal tracks, broken branches, disturbed grasses, unusual scents carried by the wind all revealed events that had unfolded while the camp slept. Nature wrote its news every morning. Someone always knew how to read it. One hunter kneels beside a patch of damp soil. His fingertips lightly trace the edge of a fresh footprint before he quietly smiles. The animal passed only a few hours ago. Perhaps breakfast will not require travelling far today. Modern tracking experts often describe footprints as frozen moments in time. The depth of a print, the sharpness of its edges, the moisture inside it, and even tiny disturbances caused by insects or falling leaves all help estimate when an animal passed. Your ancestors mastered these observations through years of patient experience. No classroom, only the land. Back at the fire, breakfast begins taking shape. Yesterday's roasted roots are warmed once more beneath hot ashes. A few pieces of smoked meat are shared among the group while someone crushes edible seeds between smooth stones to prepare a course meal. The meal is simple, yet satisfying. Many prehistoric breakfasts likely relied heavily upon whatever remained from previous meals. Fresh hunting rarely began before everyone had eaten at least a little. Energy invested before leaving camp increased the likelihood of success later in the day. Planning begins with nourishment, not with haste. A child points excitedly toward the eastern sea. Everyone looks. The sun has finally appeared. Its first brilliant edge rises above distant hills, sending golden light flowing slowly across the valley. Dewdrops covering every blade of grass suddenly sparkle like scattered jewels. Within minutes, the landscape changes completely. Colours return. Greens deepen. Brown tree trunks glow warmly. Grey rocks reveal streaks of red, gold, and white hidden during the night. The same valley, an entirely different world. You feel the warmth of a sunlight touching your face. After the long, cool hours beneath the stars, it feels almost miraculous. Not dramatic, simply welcome. Some anthropologists suggest that sunrise may have carried profound emotional significance for early humans. Each successful morning confirmed that another night had been survived. Another opportunity had arrived to gather food, strengthen relationships, teach children, and continue life's quiet rhythm. Sunrise became reassurance, repeated endlessly, across thousands of generations. One older woman steps into the sunlight, closing her eyes for a brief moment as its warmth reaches her face. Perhaps she is simply enjoying the heat. Perhaps she is offering silent gratitude. Historians cannot know. Many prehistoric spiritual beliefs remain forever beyond our reach because they left few direct traces. Some archaeological discoveries hint at rituals connected with the natural world, while others suggest symbolic relationships with animals, ancestors, or particular landscapes. Exactly what sunrise meant differed from one community to another, as it still does today. The uncertainty itself reminds you to be careful. Not every beautiful moment requires an explanation. The camp has become fully alive now. Children laugh softly while chasing one another around a fallen log. Adults sharpen stone blades dulled during yesterday's work. Others organize carrying bags, inspect spear points, or divide simple tasks for the coming day. Nobody appears to command the group. Responsibility flows naturally. Each person understands what needs doing. The fire that protected everyone through the night now serves a different purpose. It cooks, warms, repairs, brings people together once more. Its role changes with the sun, just as the people do. Looking around the camp, you realize something quietly remarkable. Nothing extraordinary happened during the night. No dramatic attack. No desperate escape. No heroic battle against impossible odds. And that is precisely the point. For most of human history, success meant that ordinary nights ended with ordinary mornings. Families woke together. The fire still burned. Children laughed. Work began again. Those peaceful mornings, repeated tens of thousands of times across countless forgotten landscapes, carried humanity farther than any single moment of glory ever could. The sun climbs a little higher. Shadows shorten. The warmth spreads across the valley. Another day has begun. And because the night was met with patience, wisdom, cooperation, and quiet resilience, everyone is here to greet it together. Section 19. The morning sun climbs steadily above the eastern hills, washing the valley in warm golden light. Shadows that stretched long across the grass only moments ago begin retreating beneath trees and scattered boulders. Dew glistens briefly before disappearing into the warming air. The night has ended, but its influence remains. Every decision made beneath the stars now quietly shapes the day ahead. The fire that guarded the camp through darkness has become the center of morning activity. Fresh wood crackles brightly as yesterday's embers awaken into lively flames. Someone stirs breakfast while another carefully places several damp branches nearby to dry for future use. Nothing is wasted. Not time. Not fuel. Not effort. The routines unfolding before you may appear simple, yet they represent something extraordinary. They are traditions. Not traditions written inside books. Traditions carried inside people. A young boy watches an older hunter inspect the point of a spear. The elder runs careful fingers along the stone edge, turning it slowly in the sunlight. He notices a tiny fracture no one else would have seen. Without speaking, he begins repairing it. The child kneels closer, watching every movement. No lesson has officially begun, yet learning has already started. Much of prehistoric education probably looked exactly like this. Anthropologists studying hunter-gatherer societies frequently observe that children learn through careful observation, participation, imitation, and gentle correction rather than through formal instruction. Knowledge lives in action, not lectures. The hunter finishes shaping the edge with several precise strikes from an antler hammer. Tiny flakes of flint fall onto the ground, sparkling briefly in the morning light before disappearing among the grasses. He hands the spear to the boy, not to keep, only to hold. The child feels its weight, studies the carefully fitted point, and returns it respectfully. One day those same hands will shape stone themselves. Not today. Today they are learning to notice. You begin seeing the entire camp differently. Everywhere invisible classrooms surround you. A grandmother shows two children how to recognize edible berries by examining the leaves rather than the fruit alone. Nearby, a young woman demonstrates how tightly woven cord should feel between careful fingers. Across the clearing, several hunters quietly discuss fresh tracks discovered at sunrise, tracing their paths through the dirt with small sticks. No blackboards, no examinations, yet every lesson carries immediate importance. Modern researchers often describe human beings as exceptional social learners. We excel not merely because we solve problems individually, but because we inherit solutions discovered by countless others. Culture becomes cumulative. Each generation begins where the last one finished. That simple advantage transformed humanity. A fascinating experiment conducted by cognitive scientists demonstrated that children naturally imitate not only useful actions, but sometimes unnecessary ones as well. This tendency, called over-imitation, may actually help preserve valuable traditions, because learners copy complete behaviors before fully understanding which details matter. Some historians believe this tendency played an important role in prehistoric survival. Better to copy carefully than accidentally omit something essential. Across the camp, an older woman prepares medicinal plants gathered several days earlier. She spreads small leaves across a smooth, flat stone, turning them occasionally so the morning sun reaches both sides evenly. A curious child asks a quiet question. Rather than answering immediately, the woman gently invites the child closer. She crushes one leaf between her fingers. "Smell!" The child does. A smile follows. The lesson continues. You realize how many senses participate in learning. Sight, touch, smell, taste, sound. Knowledge is never confined to words alone. Historians continue debating exactly how specialized prehistoric knowledge became. Did certain individuals focus primarily on healing toolmaking, tracking, or storytelling? Or did most adults possess broad competence across many skills? The answer likely varied. Different groups, different landscapes, different needs. Flexibility itself may have been one of humanity's greatest strengths. A group of teenagers prepares to leave with several experienced hunters. This will not be an important hunt. Not yet. Instead, it is an opportunity to observe. One carries spare water. Another helps transport simple equipment. A third walks quietly near the back, watching everything. The body expects perfection. Experience arrives step by step. You remember learning to ride a bicycle, drive a car, or prepare your first meal without assistance. Your ancestors experienced similar moments, different skills, the same mixture of excitement and uncertainty. A gentle breeze stirs the camp. The smell of breakfast fades, replaced by warm pine needles and sunlit grass. Butterflies begin drifting lazily among wildflowers at the edge of the clearing, while bees visit blossoms already opening beneath the strengthening sunlight. The valley feels completely different from the mysterious landscape of the night. Yet it is the same place, only viewed differently. One particularly remarkable feature of human learning is our ability to teach intentionally. While many animals learn socially, humans frequently adjust demonstrations to help beginners understand more easily. We slow down, repeat movements, correct gently, encourage patiently. Some researchers argue that this active teaching became one of the defining characteristics of our species. The archaeological record cannot preserve a teacher's voice. It preserves the results instead. Stone tools growing steadily more refined, shelters becoming more sophisticated, fire used with increasing confidence, knowledge accumulated, generation after generation. A small girl carefully gathers several straight sticks beside the stream. She proudly brings them back to the camp. Most are unsuitable for making arrows or digging tools. No one laughs. Instead, an older brother thanks her before quietly explaining why one stick bends too easily while another has hidden cracks. He hands her a better example. She compares them, immediately understanding. The first lesson becomes the beginning of the second. The camp itself encourages learning. Mistakes remain small. Curiosity grows. Modern developmental psychologists often note that children learn especially well when surrounded by supportive communities rather than isolated instruction. The prehistoric camp naturally provided exactly that environment. Many teachers, many learners, constant opportunities. Looking around, you begin recognizing that humanity's greatest invention may not have been the spear, or the fire, or even language itself. Perhaps it was the willingness to share what had been learned. Knowledge given away does not disappear. It grows. One elder who no longer joins long hunting expeditions spends the morning showing several children how to polish bone into smooth needles. His hands move more slowly than they once did, but they remain wonderfully precise. Age has transformed strength into wisdom. Anthropologists have long suggested that the unusually long human lifespan after child-rearing years may have offered an important evolutionary advantage. Grandparents and elders contribute experience impossible to replace quickly. Historians continue exploring this idea. The evidence grows steadily. Communities benefited from memory, not only muscle. The sun now stands well above the horizon. The camp gradually empties as gathering parties and hunters leave for different parts of the landscape. A few people remain behind with children and elders, tending the fire that has become the steady heartbeat of camp once more. You pause before following the others, looking back one final time. Everything seems ordinary. People working, children learning, smoke rising, birds singing. Yet hidden within these ordinary moments lies the true story of humanity. Civilization would someday build schools, libraries, universities, museums, and laboratories. But long before any of those existed, there was this. A quiet morning, a patient teacher, a curious child, and knowledge passing gently from one human mind to another beneath the open sky. Section 20. The morning has fully arrived. Golden sunlight now pours across the valley, warming the stones that had cooled beneath the stars only a few hours before. The mist lingering over the stream has disappeared completely, carried away by the first gentle breeze of the day. Birds move confidently through the branches overhead, while insects once hidden beneath the night's cool air begin their own quiet work among the grasses. The camp no longer resembles the place where you first arrived. The circle of sleepers has become a community in motion. Some people have already disappeared beyond the trees, following familiar trails toward hunting grounds or patches of ripening berries. Others remain behind, repairing clothing, tending young children, or carefully watching the fire that will once again become the center of the evening life. The rhythm continues, just as it has for thousands upon thousands of generations. You stand for a moment beside the hearth. The ashes beneath your feet contain traces of last night's warmth. Mixed among them are tiny fragments of charcoal-cracked seeds and the faint remains of yesterday's meal. To your ancestors, these are simply leftovers. To an archaeologist, they would become priceless clues. It's remarkable how much history hides inside ordinary things. A burned bone, a broken stone blade, a patch of darkened soil, a layer of ancient ash. These quiet remnants allow modern researchers to reconstruct lives that would otherwise have vanished without a trace. Every excavation begins with objects like these small, easily overlooked pieces of evidence patiently waiting beneath the earth. History rarely survives as complete stories. It survives as whispers. Scientists spend years carefully assembling those whispers into the closest picture possible of the past. A hearth reveals where people gathered. Animal bones suggest what they ate. Stone flakes reveal how tools were shaped. Microscopic pollen trapped beneath ancient bedding hints at the changing seasons. Each discovery answers one question, and raises several more. That is the quiet beauty of archaeology. The past is never completely finished. Across the clearing, a young child notices an interesting stone and proudly carries it to an elder. Together, they examine its smooth surface before deciding it is unsuitable for tool-making. The child places it back on the ground without disappointment. Not every stone becomes a tool, not every observation becomes a lesson. Yet curiosity continues. Perhaps that is humanity's greatest inheritance. Curiosity carried your ancestors across continents. Curiosity encouraged them to experiment with unfamiliar plants, discover better hunting strategies, improve shelters, tame fire, and eventually look upward toward the stars with questions no generation has completely answered. Every advance began the same way. Someone wondered. You slowly look around the camp one last time. The older hunter who quietly walked the perimeter during the night now disappears into the forest with two younger companions. The grandmother who comforted sleeping children now laughs gently, while showing them how to weave fresh grasses together. The storyteller who held everyone's attention beside the fire the previous evening now carries water from the nearby stream as though storytelling were only one ordinary part of life. Because it is. Nobody here exists for a single purpose. Each person contributes in many different ways. Strength changes with age. Responsibilities shift with circumstance. The community adapts. Modern anthropologists often describe hunter-gatherer societies as remarkably flexible. Leadership frequently depends less upon permanent authority than upon experience appropriate to a particular situation. The best tracker leads the hunt. The skilled healer cares for illness. The experienced elder remembers distant landscapes. Different people become guides at different moments. Wisdom circulates, like the fire, shared, never entirely possessed by one individual. You realize there's something quietly profound. Throughout the entire night, there was no dramatic battle against impossible dangers. No legendary hero standing alone against overwhelming odds. No single extraordinary event destined to fill history books. Instead, there were hundreds of small decisions, adding another branch to the fire, sharing warmth beneath the blanket, listening before reacting, teaching a child patiently, choosing a safe place to sleep, watching the stars, telling a story. These ordinary acts, repeated endlessly across countless generations, shaped humanity far more deeply than rare moments of heroism ever could. Civilization itself rests upon quiet habits, not spectacular victories. One of the greatest lessons archaeology continues teaching us is that early humans were neither primitive caricatures nor constant survivors locked in endless struggle. They were thoughtful, adaptable, observant, deeply social people whose lives contained work, affection, humor, uncertainty, creativity, grief, curiosity, and joy. In many ways, they were astonishingly familiar. Of course, their world differed enormously from yours. They knew nothing of electricity, nothing of engines, nothing of satellites orbiting this planet overhead. Yet they understood things modern life sometimes encourages us to forget. How to read changing weather without forecasts. How to recognize hundreds of plants by sight, smell, and season. How to depend upon neighbors rather than distant systems. How to notice the gradual movement of stars. How to welcome sunrise without checking the time. Their knowledge belonged to a different world. It was no less remarkable. A breeze moves gently across the valley. The last trace of smoke rises from the fire before disappearing into the endless blue sky. For a brief moment you imagine all the countless mornings that unfolded just like this one. Not dozens, not hundreds, but tens of thousands. Children growing into adults, adults becoming elders, elders passing along stories before quietly leaving the world themselves. The faces changed, the rhythm endured, long before cities rose beside rivers, long before pyramids touched the desert sky, long before kings' empires and written history. There were nights like this, families gathered around warm fires, communities watching over one another, people gazing towards the stars before closing tired eyes. The story of humanity did not begin with monuments. It began with moments. As the prehistoric camp gradually disappears into the soft distance of your imagination, you carry one final realization back into the modern world. Tonight, as you settle beneath your own roof surrounded by comforts your ancestors could never have imagined, your body will still follow rhythms shaped over hundreds of thousands of years. You will grow sleepy as darkness deepens. Your breathing will slow, your mind will wander through dreams. Somewhere inside you, ancient patterns continue quietly doing the work they have always done. The fire has become a bedside lamp. The cave has become a home. The stars may be hidden behind city lights, yet the human heart remains wonderfully familiar. And perhaps that's the most comforting thought of all. So as the morning sun rises over the prehistoric valley, one final time you quietly step away from the camp. The sounds of birds flowing water, gentle conversation, and crackling fire gradually fade behind you. The people remain where they have always been, living, learning, loving, watching the night become morning. Their footprints disappear into time. Their legacy never does. Now the journey is complete. You can let the valley grow distant. Let the stars slowly fade. Let the warmth of the ancient fire become only a pleasant memory. And as your own thoughts become softer, slower, and quieter, you may simply rest, knowing that for countless generations before you, people also ended their days beneath peaceful skies, trusting that after every long night, dawn would gently find its way home.